And you are watching another edition of Blue It Splits. Apparently, I lost my intro, so hard open. Nania, I was a little bit late. I'm sorry, everybody. But Nania, what's up, man?
Not too much. I mean, I've just been so bored in this part of the year. I mean, the period between, I want to say post draft and training camp, but at least you kind of get mini camp in there. But at least like between mini camp and the start of training camp is like this. It does not get more dead than this. I mean, we're writing about at JetX. We're putting up an article about the players reacting to our former backup quarterback's engagement. I mean, how much lower than that can you get?
Yeah, I saw that. I kind of felt bad. One last week again. I apologize to you before. I was definitely preoccupied. But last week we talked about summer to open the show, and then you put out a summer take. Like, I don't know if it was during the show or after the show, how the summer was terrible. And then I saw you got roasted a little bit on Twitter, which was hilarious. But I agree with you, man. I'm so over it. And the reason being for me too is like people are like, oh, like loser, get outside. It's more so the fact that I have an absurd amount of traffic around me when the summer happens because I'm at the start of the Jersey Shore, and on top of that, my job gets 10 times busier. And then the only sport on is the Mets, which the Mets are fun right now. They just got back to even the other day, but still, like, it's not hockey. It's not even basketball to me. Like, baseball is easily my fourth. So I'm definitely ready for summer to end, for camp to come. I think the rookies report, like, is it the 18th or 17th of July? Something like that, right?
Yeah, somewhere around there. I'm going to pull it up right now. But
yeah,
somewhere. We're a couple weeks away. Almost out of the woods.
What's up to Dano? John says this is a good surprise with a question mark. Which is it a good surprise, or are you questioning this being a good surprise, John? What's up, Curly? Yeah, again, like I said,
is this a good surprise? I don't know.
Is this a good? Am I happy? No, yeah, it's a thing, John, and I apologize for the listeners. Like, I don't have. Okay, July 18th. Yeah, I don't have any like official day that I could do a podcast, just because I work from 4 to 12. Or 4 to 12, and then my schedule rotates. So it's going to rotate every week. It's going to be on Tuesday this week, maybe Wednesday next week, a Thursday the next week. So I don't have a solidified like day and time. So I apologize to the people who like that consistency, but it's not possible with my my home situation, my work situation. So it is what it is. But yeah, 16 days away. We got some more fun like topic shows coming up in the next couple of weeks. Today, Nani and I are revisiting our 2023 stats. As we go through the 2023 stats, we're also going to give our 2024 predictions for the year in terms of stat leaders. We have some superlatives, some stupid crap that we do every year with the superlatives. Next week, I am drafting an all 22 versus Sabo. So we're going to have a big board of Jets players, 22 players. Whoever drafts the best team. We both start off with Rodgers. That's next week. And I think the week after that, we're doing top 25. So we have some more like fun topic-y type shows to get us through the next couple of weeks. But Curly says, trip for Jacksonville game officially booked. Curly, I was going to go to Jacksonville, and then I heard that they might not be playing in the stadium. So it kind of scared me off. And then I plan on going to Miami. So I don't know if you'll be in Miami, Curly, but that's where I plan on being. I think I'm going to Miami this year.
Why wouldn't they be playing in the stadium?
I don't know. I heard they were doing some type of renovations, and like they were going to be playing at Miami or something like that. And obviously it seemed like it was a load of horse crap that I just heard on Twitter. And then I bought it, and then I booked my kind of vacations around Miami. So it is what it is. Miami game will be good too. Let's see. I'm not used to the early streams, Joe. What's going on, Nania? The question mark was an accident. Last hour at work. This is what I need right now. Oh, awesome. So yeah, we're gonna do it. Like I said, stat predictions. We'll go through our predictions for last year a little bit. Actually, let me pull them up. When I bought tickets, it said Everbrook Stadium, Everbank Stadium. Yeah, I've heard some not great things about Jacksonville though. Curly, I don't know. Let me pull up the list of some of the stat predictions. We're gonna start off with Rodgers. I kind of feel like just almost copying pasting my predictions from last year. Unfortunately, I did not see Aaron Rodgers having 0 yards because of the injury. But what did you predict for Rodgers pre-2023, Nania? And then obviously give me your prediction for 2024. And if it did change like drastically between the stats, like, give me the reason why.
I forget what I exactly predict. Did we have like a document or something that I should pull up? I don't know if I have my exact predictions from last year.
Okay, yeah. But, so if you don't, that's okay. I think we did do a stat prediction last year in the Slack, but if you don't have the predictions for last year, that's completely okay. We can just run off of 2024. So let me know. Eagle Fang says thinks Rodgers gets 35 touchdowns and 8 picks. Okay, so is that just for Rodgers, or is that for everybody? You don't have the predictions.
I'm not sure where I would find it. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, do you want to just do 2024 then?
Okay, we'll do 2024.
I feel like all the predictions would be like thrown off, just because, especially on offense because of Rodgers.
Yeah, I'll throw some of mine out from last year too, which were drastically wrong. But if you can have like I don't know if you have like a document or whatever of the stats that we did get this year. If you have like an overall stats page, that'd be helpful to have up. So I'll go through some of my stats. I
can get that.
Yeah. 2023 for I think I predicted. I'm going to predict the same exact thing. Really. I predicted 37 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 68 completion percentage. And I think the average is like 65 or 66. Correct me if I'm wrong there. I think it'll be a little bit higher just because he does tend to take advantage of defenses. And I think he'll be better than the norm. Even though I don't think he's going to be a guy who's like 70 plus or anything like that. And those guys do exist just because Rodgers will take some shots down the field. So I fell around 68% completion percentage, 4,184 yards. Am I way off, Nania? I think our record's what? It's like just barely over 4,000 yards with Namath and like 68.
4,005, something like that. 4,007. Yeah. That's the record.
Yeah, that's sad. that is
sad. Very attainable. I mean, there were like 10 guys last year who had more than that in the league. Baker Mayfield had more than that last year. So come on, we gotta beat that one.
Yeah, and then Fitzpatrick was 31 touchdowns in 2015. I forget what his yards exactly were, but I don't think 37 touchdowns, 2-ish touchdowns a game for I think 37 might be a little bit high. I don't know. It really depends on like what they do in the red zone and things like that. I just beat 31 at the minimum. I don't want it to be Ryan Fitzpatrick in the top of the record books for the Jets for the next couple of years. So I would say 37 and 8. Am I far off of your prediction there, Nania?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably go a little bit lower just because I feel like they're going to try to run the ball a lot. And like in the red zone, I think we'll get a good amount, like a good run pass balance. So that could maybe take some touchdowns away from him. But I would say like 33 is what I'm thinking, about 2 a game. I don't know if he's going to push towards like the 40 that he's gotten a couple times in his MVP years. Yeah. But I mean, he could. Like, I don't want to rule that out. I really believe in the supporting cast enough to where if he is healthy and it breaks right, why not? But I'm going to try to settle in the middle with most of my Rodgers predictions. So I'll say like 33, which is still the most we would have ever seen.
And then how many picks do you think he's like? I think in his down year, he's 26 on 12, right? So do you think he's over 10? Do you think he's under? Where do you think he falls out in interceptions?
I think I'm gonna go with 9. I'm going to say 9, which I'm putting him 33 touchdowns, 9 picks. I mean, sign me up every day for that. But I mean, you look at before 2022, I just have his stats right here. He had 11 straight years in the single digits of interceptions, which is insane. And some of those before 2022, he was at 4, 5, 4, 2, 6, 7. So it's like you could get a season here where the guy's throwing. We've seen 4 picks in a game multiple times from our guys.
I've been there multiple times. Season.
I was there for both of well, no, Zach Wilson. I was there. I was not there for the Darnold one, but
you weren't there for the Geno. I think the Geno one was the worst. It was like out of the first 4 passes, there was 3 interceptions.
Oh yeah, I remember brutal. That was awful. So yeah, we've seen he'll have full seasons of what we've seen in a half. So I mean, but I'm going to go with 9. I think we'll, I think he's going to be somewhere between like 21 MVP year and 2022. So I'll say 9 to go with the 33 touchdowns.
Which if he's between, like you said, 2021 and 2022, the MVP year and the down year, like that's still a near top 10 quarterback, right? Like and no Jets fan is really saying that he's going to be top 5, which I still think like if you have Rodgers and he's on, Brady was good for in his latter years. Obviously there's other guys out there. I know Drew Brees was good for his last couple of years. Phillip Rivers, I don't know if he was in his 40s, but he was in his top, he was in his upper 30s. He was still pretty solid. Obviously Big Ben, I don't know how long that was, but there's guys who could, there's guys who have done it more recently than in the past. So I think for being 40 years old, and I think he could easily be a top 10 quarterback, and I think he could flirt with that top 5. I think there will be games he can outduel Josh Allen or whoever it may be, So I think top 5 might be like potentially reaching a little bit in some people's minds, but I think top 10 is like almost a lock. Like I just don't see him being bad. It's not a thing where he was great because like, yeah, he was good because of mobility and stuff in his heyday. Like he was like that Patrick Mahomes before Patrick Mahomes, but he didn't rely on that in 2020 or 2021, right? It's not like he snapped his leg and now he can't run. Like he was still winning with his mentality, obviously the stuff upstairs, and he was winning with his elite arm, which from all accounts is still elite in camp. So how is he like? And maybe this is just me wearing the green goggles, but like how is he just going to fall off a cliff to being an average quarterback where some of these rankings have him below guys like Kirk Cousins and guys like Dak Prescott or whatever? Like I just don't see how he falls off, that crazy. Like, am I just being, an idiot Jets fan, or like, do you kind of see it similar?
No, I do see that upside for sure. And like, I think the reason those 2020 and 21 MVP years are so promising in terms of like looking towards what he could do now as he gets into his 40s is because in that stage, he is already well into his like physical downturn. Like I'm looking at his numbers right now, and since 2016, his rushing attempts and yards per game have declined every single year since then. And obviously, like actually running the ball is never like a huge part of his game, but that just goes to show that the mobility for a long time now has steadily been declining in his game. And when you look at what he did in 20 and 21, it was mostly quick passing out of the pocket. Like his time to throw was way down. His depth of target was way down. It was a lot of yak. And, he's already showed you in those 2 years that he has adapted his game to this new stage of where he's at physically. And he could be great without having to be mobile and make a lot of plays just by operating from the pocket and using his brain and his accuracy. And those are two things that aren't going to go anywhere. Or, the arm could at some point. Peyton got shot, it just happened out of nowhere. But at least based on what we saw in the brief time we saw him in the preseason last year and training camp and then into this year, it doesn't seem like that the arm is going anywhere just yet. So as long as he still has that arm, the brain isn't going anywhere. And he has shown you in his recent years that well beyond his physical peak, that he's able to be an elite quarterback in different ways. So I would not rule out the possibility of him being close to those 2 MVP years. I'm not going to predict it because I do want to just like settle in the middle, like between the ceiling and the floor. But I do think that ceiling is real.
Yeah, it's a thing too where like, and I'm not even trying to be like a biased Jets fan here, but I just assuming health and he's healthy for at least 15, 16 games, whatever it may be this year. I'm really expecting him to fall into like that 6, 7, 8 range, like however you quantify that. There'll be guys above him, like if Lamar Jackson can continue to improve under Monken and Josh Allen maybe and Mahomes and maybe Stroud, like maybe there's a few guys who could be above him, but I just really don't see like 10 quarterbacks better than him or 6 or 7 quarterbacks, better than him. So I think he will be in that 6, 7, maybe even 5 range, again, however you quantify that. So I'm excited about it. You talk about losing mobility, Nania. I don't think you expected to predict this, but if you had to put your finger on Aaron Rodgers' rushing stats for this year, what would you say?
Wow. I mean, so I just have them right in front of me right now. So I kind of have like a model to go off of. But so 2022, 17 games, he had 94 yards, 1 touchdown. And like I said, he's declined every single year for about 7 years now. So I'm going to have to go a little bit lower than that. I think he'll sneak in a touchdown there somewhere. Not on a sneak, maybe on like one of those, Peyton Manning type bootlegs or Mark Sanchez. I think did it once.
Mark Sanchez. Yeah.
Let's give him 60 yards and a touchdown.
I put
Dalvin Cook's whole season last year.
Yeah, oh, there you go, Singer. Hold on. 60. I put 66 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think one will be a sneak. And like it's not a thing where you're gonna like push with Aaron Rodgers, because I think Jets fans would probably try to kill Nathaniel Hackett. But I think it could be a thing where like they're hurrying up and he sees that somebody's not ready. He sees a wide open, A gap. Somebody's not, substituting right, whatever it may be, and he just sneaks it in there. So I think you'll get one of those. And then I think you get the Mark Sanchez special handoff, roll out to the left. Absolutely nobody's there. And he just walks one in. So I'm going to say 66 yards, 2 touchdowns. Again, 37 touchdowns throwing, 8 interceptions. And the thing with the interceptions too is, I know the down year he had 12, but it's a thing where like you kind of said in terms of your touchdowns, you said 33. It's because I don't think he's able to force the ball a lot, really. I don't see him throwing a high amount of interceptions. I think he'll be the thing where he'll just dirt it, take the sack, or throw it out of bounds. especially with this defense that he has. You don't have to force it. And on top of that, you have a really good running game, or what should be a really good running game. So I don't think he's going to throw many picks, and probably not as many attempts as he's had in the past, which kind of leads me to believe like 37 is probably a little bit high. I was kind of leading towards like 35 when I was talking about it, but I'll stick with what I wrote down. So past Aaron Rodgers, which I think we had some predictions in here, or at least we had some questions about Rodgers. Dano says, where would you guys draw the line between being aggressive and securing wins? I could see Rodgers' completion percentage being 80 due to lack of aggressiveness needed from the passing game, but then again, we need to get better. 80 is obviously ridiculously high. Like I could see that in some games, maybe if he goes for like, well, that'd be like 16 for 20 if the Jets are just running the ball down the Pats' throats and kind of running out the clock. Like I could see games with near 80, but overall throughout the season, like you're going to have shootouts with some teams, right? You're going to have shootouts with the Bills, maybe, the Dolphins, maybe some other teams, maybe the Niners a little bit in week one, whoever it may be. So you're going to have to force the ball down the field a little bit. And I don't think Rodgers is going to be a guy who's just going to always be dink and dunk. Like he's going to take advantage of the defense, but that back shoulder ball has made Rodgers' really career. Like that's probably his best throw. So I can't just see him going away from that. So I don't think Rodgers has ever been a guy who's had like a ridiculously high completion percentage. I think it's always been pretty good, right? But it's never been like Tom Brady with the Pats, which are just, you want to stab your eyes out sometimes.
Drew Brees was a completion percentage god because he really relied on the short game. Yeah.
Exactly. And Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, they would just stack receivers and rubs and all these things, and they would just complete the ball, 2 yards, past the line of scrimmage, and they'd run for 5-6 yards a yak, and they just nickel and dime you down the field, and it drove you insane. But Rodgers has never really been that guy, so I don't think it's a thing where he'll ever be at near 80. But with that being said, he is a guy who will force the ball a little bit down the field and take some shots. So he's never going to be that guy. Now, he doesn't have to force it as much, like I just said, because we do have the defense. We do have the running game. So I don't think the interceptions will be high. But I always think his completion percentage is never going to be like drastically high just because of the way he plays.
Yeah, he's at 65 for his career. And I think I like the balance to his game. I think he does a really good job of taking what the defense gives him in a way where, like, if that's the check down, he's shown he loves throwing to his running backs. Like his Green Bay running backs scored a lot of receiving touchdowns, had plenty of catches, which is why Breece Hall has an exciting potential with him. But like we know he could throw the go route really well, throw those back shoulder balls. So I think like his completion percentage will never. He did lead the league in 2020 at 71, but he was just that's one of the greatest seasons of all time. I mean, he had like no issue, zero weaknesses in that season in any way. I mean, and that's another reason you could still be excited. Like that wasn't that long ago. I know it was the COVID year and everything, but he's only a couple years removed from two like sublime seasons, 85 touchdowns and 9 picks in 2 years. I mean, he just did that. So like I don't think he'll ever be a super high completion percentage guy because he is going to take those shots, and I don't think they're going to sit on the ball at the end of the game because Aaron Rodgers is going to see one-on-ones on 3rd and 2, and he's going to audible out of those, and he's going to take shots to Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams when he likes it because that's what he's always done. And it's going to, there will be some times where that doesn't work, but at times you're going to seal games because of it, and that's going to outweigh the downside of that. So, yeah, he's never like a super high completion percentage guy because he is willing to take those chances that some other quarterbacks aren't. And that's why completion percentage is just it's a pretty dumb stat because it doesn't really tell you how accurate you are. It basically tells you what kind of throws do you try, because like Jake Browning led the league in completion percentage last year. So all it shows you is that who's the most of a game manager and who's more aggressive is really what it shows you. So I usually don't really look at it or put too much stock into it.
Jake Browning.
What the hell is even that?
Rob D, according to some media, we got to deduct 5 touchdowns and 500 yards from Rodgers' stats because he let the team know in advance he was missing 2 days of padless practice. And we're not gonna do this a ton because it's been hammered out so much. There's been nothing talked about. It does I am a little bit happy that it's not ayahuasca or darkness retreat, so people couldn't put that out on Twitter. And it was just a trip to Egypt. Apparently that's what it was. And listen, Not the biggest deal in the world. Again, I'd rather have them make the 10 voluntaries and miss the 2 mandatory. It just seems like because of the wording and specifically Salah coming out and wording and how he did really kind of threw some gasoline onto a fire that didn't need to be stoked. So Salah did F that up a little bit. If he just said that, hey, we excused it, but by the CBA, it's technically unexcused, so we'll get fined. I think it would have solved the entire thing. So now you have people out there, oh, he said it was unexcused. They knew about it. Now, could Rodgers have technically gone to Egypt a different time and changed the schedule? Yeah, maybe. But again, I'm not going to lose it over 2 days. We're not going to get into it. It's stupid, right? It's done. Harold, what is up? Hit the like if you haven't. Gangrene says expect a top 10 QB, no doubt. I do too, and I think it kind of it says something about Rodgers, but I think it also says something about the league as well. I don't think the quarterback play in the league right now is uber elite. The years where you had, Peyton, you had Brady, you had Breeze, you had Rodgers, you had Big Ben, you had Rivers, you had Eli, who was a top, 8, 9, 10 quarterback throughout his career. There's
Matt
not
Ryan.
A lot of guys.
A lot of guys in there.
Yeah, Matt Ryan. And let's say 10 years ago, a decade ago, it was stacked with those guys, but there's guys like Dak Prescott who were sniffing the top 10 at times. Jalen Hurts is a guy who people were saying is in the top 5, top 3. And I think Jalen Hurts is severely overrated. There's not a lot of great quarterbacks now. Even guys who were kind of in the upper tier a couple of years ago. Burrow, we have massive questions about him in terms of his health going forward. Herbert kind of fell off the last year or so. Is he still that guy? So Lamar Jackson's been up and down. I don't think quarterback play throughout the league is really that great right now, but it's kind of a side point.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting point because a lot of the guys who are at the top, if you're looking at numbers, are guys who are kind of benefiting from the scheme to get there. It's like no one is going to question that Dak Prescott is pretty good or Kirk Cousins is good or even Purdy is good, but these aren't guys who, all those quarterbacks you just mentioned, everyone could watch them and be like, yeah, that's a great quarterback. He's capable of lifting his team when they need them to. He's the reason that they're successful. But a lot of these top quarterbacks now in terms of producing, and again, I'm not saying they're not good, but you watch them and you're more impressed with the offense than you are with these quarterbacks. They're more a part of the result than the reason for it. So it's a weird point right now where I think there are a lot of really good schemes and teams in the league that are the quarterbacks are being propped up with them. And we don't have as many of those, superstar quarterbacks, but there are a lot of good prospects who we're hoping to see, come up, and maybe in a few years, Stroud and Love and all these guys are that next wave of quarterbacks. But it is a transitional stage right now because we just had a lot of those guys retire a few years ago. So we're trying to see if that next wave can come up.
Rob D says or asks, who gets the one random offensive touchdown from 2024? Kenny Yeboah, Irv Charles. So kind of question. It's not like who has a surprising few touchdowns. If you had to predict, who is the guy who has just one individual touchdown for the Jets offense? Who would you say that would be?
I'm trying to go really deep in. How about Nick Bawden? How about that?
I think
he had one last year, right? Against the Patriots.
Yes.
He has a touchdown
yeah. Yep, he did. Bawden's a good one. I can even see Yeboah, who we said. I could see Brownlee just getting one. I think those are some good names. Yeboah, Bawden, Brownlee.
Here's a good one. Who's the most likely offensive lineman to score a touchdown?
Fashanu? Bring him in an extra as an extra tackle and he leaks out. Yeah.
They're definitely not going to send Tyron Smith out on the route. I think we can be sure about that.
Yeah,
so, maybe I guess I would say it's probably him, or maybe AVT, split him out to tackle.
I don't know.
I don't know, dude. Actually,
the fans are mad. You moved him to tackle. You moved him to this spot. He keeps getting injured at different spots. Watch, he plays receiver for one play. He breaks his tibia. No, absolutely not.
That one, no. Let's do Olu. He's most likely, I guess.
Olu. So receptions. Last year I had 90 for Garrett Wilson. I think Marshall in 2015, because that's the last really dominant receiver season we've seen, and I think we are going to get one of those seasons for Garrett Wilson. I do think this year he plants himself firmly into the top 10 and kind of the polar opposite of quarterback. Like there are so many good receivers. So me saying top 10 is not like a, it's not a shot at him. I think he's a stud. But I do think this is a year where he like, again, firmly puts himself in that conversation for even maybe like, stepping towards the top 5. Brandon Marshall's the last dominant season we've had. I think he was a little bit over 100, maybe even approaching 110. I forget exactly what his numbers were, but 1,500 yards, like 15 touchdowns, 100 and something catches, right, for Brandon Marshall. I'm going to say 101 catches for Garrett Wilson, just slightly over. I do think there's an argument that like, hey, there are so many guys to spread the ball to in this offense. So maybe it's a little bit lower, but I still see Garrett Wilson being dominant and Aaron Rodgers taking advantage of that. So I'm going to say 101 catches. Last year, I predicted 1,331 yards. I think he had a little bit under 1,100. This year, I guess I'll say the same thing, 1,317, let's say, right around there. And I'm going to go with 11 touchdowns for Garrett Wilson. What are yours? I'm assuming you're going to say it's Garrett Wilson who's the leader and not guys like Mike Williams or Corley, but maybe I'm mistaken. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Allen Lazard to lead in receptions. He's got the connection with Rodgers. No. Garrett Wilson, I think he is going to have a massive year in terms of just like, obviously everyone has high expectations, but whatever your ceiling is, I do think he's going to get to that because the model for Rodgers in his recent seasons when he was successful was that, heliocentric model around Devontae Adams with a huge gap between everyone else. I mean, there were seasons where a running back had the second most targets on the team. It was like 100 targets behind Adams. And I think the Jets are built to do something similar because they're well-rounded, but, Mike Williams coming off the injury, you don't have a ton of depth at receiver. And, it would be good to have those guys kind of put in roles where they are being targeted less often, but doing things where they could be efficient and effective. So he had 168 targets last year. I think he'll stay around that, but he'll catch a much higher percentage of them and get more touchdowns. So I'm going to put him at, let's put him at 110 receptions. I'm going to go around 1,400 yards, 10 touchdowns.
Okay. Yeah. So we're pretty close. I think it might be a little bit low. You said 168 last year, just because maybe the ball was force fed to him a little bit last year in situations where maybe it shouldn't have been. I do think it'll be spread around a little bit more, maybe more like high 140s, low 150s. It's not, obviously I'm being a little bit nitpicky there. I do think it'll be a little bit less than last year just because of Rodgers being able to take advantage of Conklin versus a tight end or versus a linebacker, or Mike Williams versus number 2, where, Zach Wilson at times was just forcing it to Garrett Wilson in situations where he shouldn't have. And then I don't know if you watched the Garrett Wilson review, Nania, yet, but like there's times in that review where I'm like, he's like even the scheming, and I get, again, people are going to blame everything's fixed with Rodgers. I get that, but or even now that Zach Wilson's got like blaming everything on Zach Wilson, there was times where Zach Wilson's first and second read on like 3rd and 3 was not, and Garrett Wilson was on the backside of the reads. It's like, why are we not reading Garrett Wilson on 3rd and 3 like immediately? Like what is going on here? So some of the scheming was absolutely terrible as well last year, but yeah, I think he'll get maybe a little bit less targets nonetheless. So rushing yards, Nani, I'll let you go first. I'm assuming it's going to be Breece Hall. It's not going to be Braylon Allen or Isaiah Davis. And you're actually, before we even get to receiving, I actually kind of want to, rushing the ball. In terms of the other guys in the receiving game, what are your thoughts on them? And maybe I'm not going to get into like the depth guys, but some key figures. Conklin, like, what are you expecting from him in terms of some of his stats, or like a roundabout? I'm not asking for an exact, prediction here, but like Conklin, Mike Williams, Corley, like, what do you think his involvement is in year one? Maybe even a guy like Breece Hall. You did say that Rodgers likes to target his running backs, and we've seen that, guys like obviously, Aaron Jones in recent years. So what are your predictions for some of the other guys in terms of receiving game?
Yeah, in terms of Conklin, and I did an article on this recently, but I think what we're going to see from him is not necessarily a huge spike in catches and yards, because like not everyone can get that. There's only one ball. So like if Garrett Wilson's going to catch more passes, if Breece Hall, all these guys, like not everyone could have a huge spike in opportunities. So Rodgers has generally not used the tight end very often in terms of total targets. And he hasn't had the greatest tight ends. Conklin has an argument to be up there. But I do think Conklin's targets were inflated a little bit because he got a lot of dump offs because the receivers were so bad. So I think we'll see less of that. and more of him getting targeted on third down, in the red zone. So I think like he had 61 catches last year. I think we could see that go down to like 45, 50. But he had 620 yards, 621, and I could see him staying around that on fewer receptions and targets while adding 5-6 touchdowns. Because Rodgers he has gotten a lot of touchdowns to his tight ends. That's something he does. And he's done it with random people like Richard Rodgers, Robert Tonyan, guys like this who you never heard of, but then suddenly they've 8 touchdowns with Rodgers. So I think we're going to see him score more touchdowns. I think he's going to be more efficient with like making key third down plays and getting chunk plays. And being less of like, here's like a bunch of 5-yard receptions, because that's all he really did last year. And he's capable. We both know he's capable of more than that with his route running and his contested catching, but he just didn't get as many opportunities to do it. And most of his catches didn't really mean that much. So I think he'll have fewer catches, but they'll be more meaningful. That's what I think his impact is going to be.
So that kind of, that seems like that seems like you're, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you think he's going to be like the number 4 in terms of targets, and then guys like Mike Williams and probably Breece Hall are your 2 and 3 in targets for the Jets offense when it all comes down to it?
That's how I would put it. Yeah, I think Breece versus Williams is interesting because like I don't think he had 95 targets last year, and a big part of that is having a really bad receiver room, so you're checking the ball down a lot because nobody's open. So I don't know if he'll quite get to that, but I still think he'll get a lot because Rodgers does like to use the running backs. And as much as I like Williams, I think he's more of like he's not a target magnet type of guy. He's a deep threat, vertical threat, contested catch guy. He's not someone you throw a lot of passes to. He's a guy who fewer receptions, but those are going to be 20-yard catches and touchdowns when you do throw to him. So I think a guy like Breece does have the potential to out-target someone like Williams, especially if he has some injury issues. Maybe he's slightly declined compared to what he was. So I think Breece versus Williams is going to be a race for second in targets, and then Conklin will be 4th.
Do you think they're probably around the same area, like 600, like 600 to 800 yards potentially for guys like so Mike Williams might have, like, I guess you're saying like he might have more yards because he's going to have the higher, yards per catch.
Yardage wise, I think Mike Williams will easily be second. I'm saying more like targets, but for yard, like I think Mike Williams could have a season where it's like he only catches
like 40, 50
passes, but then he is near 1,000 yards off of not a lot of catches because
sign me up.
He's going to get a lot of because you have Tyler Conklin, you have Breece Hall. We know what Garrett Wilson can do as a short-range route runner. You have a lot of short game options. And then plus Corley's going to get design touches. Gibson looks like he's going to be involved. So they have plenty of short game options. So I think Mike Williams is going to have plenty of opportunities to, just get deep ball targets. And you're not going to see a ton of him, but whenever he shows up, it's going to be a big play. So I think he's going to be a type of guy who's going to be high efficiency on low volume.
Yeah, I think if you told me right now, like whatever the catches may be, 1,000 yards for Mike Williams, I think you sign up for that every day with your number 2, right? Especially if you're talking about Garrett Wilson sniffing, 13, 14, maybe even 1,500 yards. Take 1,000 from every day. But I think pretty much really similar to you in terms of I think Conklin will be more involved in a more meaningful way into the checkdowns. I just did the review on him, and there's times where he's open versus linebackers and the ball is just not seeing him. I do think he's a little bit more ability up the seam than some people realize. He had he had at least 6, 7 really nice contested catches last year. So I think he'll be more efficient, but I agree with you in terms of obviously Garrett line share, 140 to 160 targets, somewhere in there, maybe even a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower. Mike Williams will be the second in yards, but he's a big X factor in terms of how healthy he is when he's healthy. But I do think he'll be the number 2 in yards, but number 3 in targets. Breece will be number 3 in targets. And then you have Conklin at 4. And then in terms of Corley, I think we talked about it a couple of weeks ago in terms of like his stats and stuff like that. But he'll get some design touches, jet sweeps, end arounds, tunnel screens, whatever it may be. But what would a successful year look like for Corley, and kind of like where do you predict him at as well?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like rookie year are going to keep the expectations pretty low. I think long term, I'm a fan of the potential, especially because a lot of what you highlighted, like there is more to his game than the gadget stuff in terms of deep game and route running. So I do think down the line he has the potential to tap into that. But I think for this year, provided no one else gets injured. Because if they do, then you are going to have to count on him. But as long as everyone's healthy, I do think it's going to be mostly design stuff underneath routes. Like I would say a lot of what we saw from Gibson last year, similar to that, maybe a little more expansive because he's much more of a playmaker than Gibson is. So I would say I think he could maybe even have a similar number of rush attempts to receptions. I could even see something like that. Or at least a lot of his receptions will be screens. So I do think it's going to be a fairly regular role, but maybe like, let's say 3 touches a game between rushing and receiving, and a lot of design stuff. And hopefully all I really want to see from him is just good ball security, good hands, and a consistent playmaking when he does get the ball. Because if he could do those things, like he's consistently making people miss, generating a lot of yak more than you expect him to, then you could see down the line, like, okay, we know what he can do well, that he's a player for us in that role. And if he can develop the rest of it, that's great. Hopefully he can, but let's at least see that he can have a high floor doing what he does best.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I really do. In terms of like, he's going to be in more of a specialized role and be good, or maybe even great, but at least be good in what we want you, what we draft you to be good in. Like the secondary stuff is him getting vertical and contested catches. Like I think he has that ability, but in that rookie year, get 300-400 yards, whatever it may be. Maybe even a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, depending on health and how quickly he picks up the offense. But be good in yak. Have good ball security, and then maybe have a few flashes in the pan, like vertically contested, whatever it may be. But at least let what we drafted you for translate quickly. So I completely agree.
What do you think about using him on kickoff return? Because I feel like he would be my number one option. I just don't know if they've actually thought about it or if they are considering it. But I think he connects well to it.
I completely agree. I think you do want more of like that guy who's quick, like a little bit more quick and shifty than like the long strider type of guys like you've seen in the past. The thing about it is, just because like he moves like you may want a kick returner to move with these new kickoff returns. Like I don't think he's ever done it in college, so it does put a little bit of a question mark, because like it's easier said than done to kick a kick or a punt, or like know when to let it bounce, when no to not let it bounce. Again, not exactly however those rules are going to play out with a new kickoff. So I think it's a little bit harder said than done to just go from not doing it to then doing it. So how quickly does he translate to it? But in terms of the skill set, I think his skill set is perfect. If he can make good decisions, if he can catch the ball, once he has his hand or the ball in his hands, I think again his skill set's perfect. So I think he's a great option for it. But you're gonna need 2 guys, right? Because of the new kickoff rules, at least how I've seen it. It looks like you have 2 guys back there. So Corley and Gibson. Corley, I could see even got like Davis being good if he can catch the ball there as well. So it'd be interesting. But right now, if I had to predict like week 1, it's probably him and Gibson, just assuming he can catch a ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's also something to be said for, because of the rules changing, maybe that opens up more possibility for new players to come in, because like even if you are an experienced returner, it's still going to be new for them. So maybe there is that element of, teams will be a little more willing to experiment more so than leaning towards experienced guys, because even for them, it's an adjustment and you don't know what they'll do. Although they did bring in Tariq Cohen, but I know Robbie said he was looking pretty good in camp, which is good. And I think he's a chance to make the roster, but I just want to keep expectations low for him, because I mean, it's been 4 years since he played a regular season game. He's had ACL, Achilles. So I'm going to keep my expectations. So, I mean, what do you think of him then? I mean, now that I brought him up, like, do you see him making a roster, having any type of role?
I was just going to transition.
Especially because like competing against Izzy, like who's, his stock's kind of down right now.
I was going to throw that to you actually. So that's great that you thought of it first. It's, I was going to say, who's running back 4? Is it Cohen? If I had to say right now, like it's almost impossible to tell, because he hasn't played since 2020, right? And we can't see practice. Like I don't know to say like if he has like same explosion and stuff, but based on what Robbie said, like he seems like he still has some juice in his legs and stuff. So, he's made some noise. I haven't heard anything about Izzy. You even heard that guy Valaday or whatever his name is has gotten reps over Izzy with the first team. So Izzy seems really far down on the depth chart and doesn't really offer anything on special teams. So I think whether it be, and it probably is Cohen over Jaheim Grant, but he's another guy. Like I think that last spot, whether it be running back 4, receiver 6 or 7, is going to be that special teams guy. But if I had to predict, I would say I guess it's Cohen at running back 4, like gun to my head right now. If I had to predict, whether it be it's kind of like Cohen versus Grant versus Izzy, right? I feel like in that return type of role. Or at least a special teams type of role. Are you there too, or do you think it is a guy like Izzy who makes, or maybe they don't carry any one of those guys?
I do think it'll be Cohen. That's what I'm leaning towards right now. Just I just get the sense that they're not super high on Izzy, and he really didn't show much. I mean, he had the one nice run. I mean, he had a couple decent runs in the preseason, but overall wasn't great. Then regular season, and he also had ball security issues in college that persisted both throughout the preseason and the regular season. I think he had a couple fumbles. So I don't know. I just don't get the sense that they're super high in him. And if Cohen looks as good as Robbie's been saying, which of course we trust what Robbie says, especially more so than anyone else who's there, then I think it's worth putting stock into. So if he continues to do that, because I think his receiving ability is something that they would be intrigued by. Like we talked about how Rodgers likes to throw to the backs, and that Breece is an option to do that. I think both of the guys they drafted have that ability, and Cohen could also, like when Cohen was a household name and he was still a big time playmaker, he was doing more as a receiver than he was as a rusher. So I think his ability to do that also gives you some offensive depth in a versatile way. So gun to my head right now, I do think it'll be Cohen as the 4th.
And I know obviously he was, again, he had a lot of receptions and stuff. Like there was years where he had like 600, 700, 800 yards of yards and only like 400 or 500, maybe even 600 yards of rushing. But was he ever like a kick returner, punt returner for the Bears? I don't remember him doing that a ton. But
punt returner.
Oh, was he? Okay.
I don't think his kick. Yeah, kick return he did as a rookie. He didn't, and then he didn't do it after that.
And then in terms of punt returning, what were some of his numbers?
Well, he did make All-Pro for his punt returning in 2018. He does have one touchdown, 12.5 yards per return, 2018. So yeah, punt returning, that's where his strength was. Kick returning, he didn't do a lot of.
Which I think the punt returning skill set is much more. That's what you want for the new kickoff return. So I wouldn't see that and be like, oh well, he can't kick a return, because I think it's really more similar to punt returning more so than his kick returning of a few years ago. So
that's a good point. I think the punt return, kick return have been balanced more with this new rule. Like in kick return, you saw a lot of long striding wide receivers who were doing it.
Yeah, Cordell Patterson, Josh Cribbs, Hester. Yeah, Hester was more short stride, but
guys who could get to their second gear, hopefully you block up one hole and he can just dart through it and win the race. Whereas punt return is like, okay, you're going to catch the ball. There's someone right in front of you. Can you sidestep him? Then there's another guy coming. Can you sidestep him? Kick returns is going to be a little bit more like that, because you're just going to run up and it's going to be like you're at the line of scrimmage on a regular play. So, that's a good point. I think maybe it is worth putting more stock into punt return experience than kick return if you're kind of
undoubtedly.
I don't think into this.
I don't even think it's a conversation really, because like you get the ball and defenders are what, like 10, 15 yards away. Like you're not going to be able to get into full stride. Like think about some of so you have to be able to react more quickly. So it's going to be much, much more similar to punt returning than kick returning, in my opinion. But just look at the Jets' history of some of the long stride type of guys. Like Cromartie's not a punt returner, like he's a long stride guy, fast guy. Justin Miller was, I don't think, super shifty. I don't know if you even remember, him necessarily returning punts. You had Brad Smith, who's a taller guy, not the most shifty, but got the top speed well. So that was more about like diagnosing, having some contact balance through your speed and stuff like that. Where again, I think the punt returning is going to be or the kick returning is going to be much more similar to punt returning. I wouldn't value the long striders and stuff like that. So a guy like, Braylon Allen wouldn't work as well as an Isaiah Davis, in my opinion, because Isaiah Davis is a little bit more like explosive in a short area type of deal. So moving on actually to two running backs, we both think, Cohen will be the running back 4. Who is going, or again, it's going to be Breece Hall, obviously, but what are his yards and his touchdowns? And if you obviously throw, I would guess you could throw receiving into there as well. Some people think you have 2,000 all-purpose yards. Like, where do you sit on Breece?
I think in terms of his rushing, I feel like he's going to get over 5 yards per carry this year. I mean, he's at 5.8 as a rookie, and that's just only as long as he has AVT. He's been above 6, and when AVT has played. that's just with him and the rest of the offensive line being trash. So like with what they have now, it's very exciting to think about what he could do. And on top of that, no quarterback. So they're always stacking the box on him. So the fact that he's already done that, and now you're adding the new pieces, and you have Rodgers, it's the ceiling is it's limitless what he could do. And part of that is like
pull out old Russell Wilson there, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, like I mean, part of it is because like it is a smaller sample. He did have like a 70-yarder, 80-yarder in there. So it inflated a little bit, but the fact that he has been able to do that so frequently, hit those home runs, is like that's not something you should take away from him, I think. And he should only be able to do more of it with the situation. So I'm gonna go be very bullish with my Breece predictions. I think his attempts are gonna be up because I mean, he started slow last year in terms of getting him in opportunities because like he was coming off the injury, so they worked him in slower. He only averaged 13 carries a game for the full season last year. I think you're gonna be leading more. He's going to be from the start of the season running the offense. So I think that could get up to like 18 carries a game. So I'm gonna pull out the calculator here. So 18 and 17 games, we can get him to 300 carries. And if he's averaging, let's say 5.3 yards per carry, you could get him up to like 1,600 rushing yards. Like I don't even think that's outrageous. Like when you're going off of what he's already done and how poor that situation has been and projecting that it's going to be better. So you start with that and then you look at his receiving. And again, I don't know how many targets he's going to get. 95 was crazy last year. So maybe even if that goes down to like 60, 70 and he catches 50 of them and averages like 8 yards a reception, 400 yards, throw that onto his 1,600 rushing. There's your 2,000 yards. So I think 2,000 all-purpose is very much in reach for him. And touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, I'm giving him 10 of those because the fact that he got 5, you know how many carries he had inside the 1 yard line last year?
None.
Inside the 3 yard line?
It was one. It was like none or
one for the season inside the 3 yard line. There was another one that got the Raiders one that he scored that got called back. Outside of that, he had one against Washington. And he still had 5 touchdowns because he's able to score outside of the red zone. But most touchdowns get scored at the goal line. He didn't even get those. Now you're hoping that he will. I'm putting him at 10 rushing touchdowns as well. And I'm going to give him 4 receiving touchdowns again. So I'm going to give him 2,000 all-purpose, 14 total touchdowns.
So what was the breakdown of it? It was 6. It was 16. You're giving out touchdowns. That was very Oprah Winfrey like of you, Nania. Like you got a little excited there. Like I'm like you know what? This many yards. I'm gonna give him 12 touchdowns. I'm gonna give him this many touchdowns, this many receptions. You get this. So you just Winfreyed it there. But your breakdown was what was like 1,600 and 400 or 500 receiving yards. What was it exactly?
Yeah, I said 1,600 rushing, 400 receiving. I mean,
okay,
the 400 receiving maybe is a little low. Like I just don't know how many targets he's going to get. It's hard to say, but at least 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, I would say, receiving. But like the ceiling is a lot higher depending on what his role is. Like I think it depends on how involved is he going to be in the route tree. Like is he going to get a bunch of angle routes? Are we going to flex him out, put him in the slot sometimes, give him some slants, do stuff like that? Because the reason he got 95 targets is because, like we said, the receivers were terrible. So they were always dumping the ball off to him. Yeah. So, but he can do some route running stuff. We've seen it. So I think his targets are going to come down to that now because I think you're going to get better protection. Receivers are going to be a little better. So I don't think we're going to see as many just dump offs. So that will take away from his targets a little bit. But I think he still has the capability to get a lot of them because he is a weapon. We've seen the potential for him to do it. It just hasn't been used too much. So I could see fewer, similar to Conklin, I could see the targets going down from 95, but similar production because he's doing more with each target. So I don't know. Like, do you see him touching that 95 targets again, or do you kind of see that going down?
Yeah, I don't know because like I feel like at a certain like to one extent, the Jets just dumped the ball off because the receivers sucked and Zach Wilson just got nervous and chucked the ball down to the running back. But at the same point, like did we I guess at the same point, did we take advantage of him enough in the receiving game as like a primary option, like isolating him versus a linebacker? So I guess it's kind of a little bit of give and take there in terms of maybe using him in more advantageous positions or kind of targeting him off the jump a little bit quicker. So I don't think it'll be as much, but I do think they'll use him more efficiently, just like they use, just like I said about Tyler Conklin, or at least Rodgers will use him more efficiently. And again, hey, you have him versus a linebacker one-on-one, even if he's flexed out wide and an empty set, I'll take that deep shot, with Breece Hall. Like I think he has the capability of doing those type of things, like an Alvin Kamara.
He's had some vertical wins that he didn't get targeted on. There's one against the Eagles where he was he was outside the numbers. Yeah. And he was one-on-one with the linebacker and he toasted him, but didn't get the ball. So I see stuff like that, and I think, why shouldn't we try more of that? So I think Garrett Wilson too.
There's quite a few times he was open vertically, Garrett Wilson, and the ball was either underthrown, thrown out of bounds, not targeted. With that being said, Garrett Wilson undoubtedly has to improve in his contested catches. I think that's his major weakness right now at the NFL level, winning vertically in terms of like stacking guys, contested catches, but he could definitely improve on it. But he was not taking advantage of, obviously, as a vertical receiver last year. But yeah, I see it pretty similar. Last year I predicted 1,088 yards. This year I'm going to predict, which I think he's at was it 996, right? Or 994, because there's I'm not trying to be that guy, but the Jets can't even do math, right? Like, how does that happen where they can't do addition? Like, we're not even talking about multiplication. We're not even talking about like PEMDAS type stuff. We're not even doing, to the power of anything like that. Like simple addition, Jets couldn't do last year in that Pats game, which was, which is wild to me. There's Nania showing the play versus the Eagles. So yeah, I guess we'll get to my play. Yeah, you can see him on the bottom of the screen circled right there. So for Breece this year, I'm going to predict 1331, and 567 receiving yards. Now, why exactly? I don't know exactly how it comes to receiving yards, but that's about what I feel it will be. So I think that totals him to a little bit below 1,900. I think that's what 1898. Or 1898 in terms of total yards. I predicted it on this 10 rushing touchdowns. If I had to do receiving touchdowns, I didn't even think about that. Probably like 4 or 5. So I'm going to say 14, 15 total touchdowns for Breece and about 1,900 all-purpose yards, which I think is it's possible. Like the fact that he even got what he got last year, which how many receiving yards did he have last year? On those, was it not? You said 95 targets. I don't even know the receiving yards that he had, but he was
591.
Okay, so last year talking about nearly 1,600 all-purpose yards, I think that can easily go up. 1, he's going to be healthy all year. 2, he's not going to be running into loaded boxes like I showed you guys. And 3, he's just going to be put in more advantageous, positions, and the offense is going to have the ball more. He's going to have, the offense is going to definitely out-snap what we got last year. So, yeah, I could easily see 19 to 2,000, even 2,100. If it's not that, I wouldn't be necessarily disappointed. It depends on how much how much carries he gets or how many carries he gets. But yeah, I think about 2,000 should be your prediction for Breece. He's a dominant player. I don't know how he put up those yards last year with what he was working with. But past that, in terms of like Breece and some of the carries and how it's going to be split up, do you think he's like an 85% guy in terms of like the targets or the rushes in the backfield, or how do you think the split goes? Do you think Isaiah Davis and Allen like factor in a little bit more than I'm thinking? I think Breece is probably like 80-85% of the carries, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've gone back and forth on it because they did draft 2 of them, and I think we like both of them too, and it seems that the team does. But I feel like it's really going to be a Breece-centric attack because they'll get their carries. Like no running back gets every single touch in the league. But I do. Yeah, you said 80-85%. I do think it'll be like that. Like I think your typical game, you might get 3 or 4 Braylon Allen carries, 1 or 2 Isaiah Davis, if any, because like there's just so much potential. I think they're going to want to fully tap into that. And then we talked about the passing game and how like this still isn't a deep receiver room. So I think you got to reach into other areas to make up for that. And I think Breece really gives you the capability to do that. So yeah, like it would be great to rest him and all that. But I just think there's too much. This could be the best running back in the league, if it's not already, in terms of what he adds above what's around him. So I do think it's going to be very Breece centric. I don't know if I see this being like a very strong committee. I mean, maybe it'll be a little bit more than what I said. Maybe you'll get like 4 or 5 Braylon Allen, 2, 3 Davis, something like that. But yeah, I think it's going to be very Breece centric.
Yeah, I would say like 80% Breece, maybe like 12 Allen, 8 Davis, or something like that. So what that probably puts them around like Allen like 250, 300 yards, and Davis like 100 to 200 yards, something like that.
Yeah, probably something like that, I would say.
Yeah, and I think you do take advantage. Like, listen, Breece is a dominant guy, and it's one of those positions where teams tend to run them into the ground for their first couple of years, and then they get rid of them. It's going to be interesting to see what the Jets do with Breece. I do think, because the Jets and hopefully they find a superstar quarterback that they have to pay. But once Rodgers retires and you clear up some of the dead cap of, some guys who've been, Lake and Tomlinson we're still paying, and Uzama and whoever else, like once you get rid of some of that stuff and Rodgers dead money, I do think there's a possibility of keeping the big four, of obviously, JJ, Breece, Wilson and Sauce. But if you are going to keep 3, I think the decision does come down to JJ versus Breece. And considering the Jets don't have Reddick under contract going forward, and it's only McDonald, like JJ may be a guy who you need to keep, especially for a team who really values pass rush and values their DNs, where running backs are more like replaceable. But then the conversation becomes, but is Breece replaceable? Air quotes. I think average guys are replaceable, but as a guy who can get you 2,000 all-purpose yards and be really efficient, replaceable. Like, where do you fall in that conversation? Because I think it's a good conversation in terms of like keeping the top 4, and then just Breece being like not just a running back, like he's a special running back, and you should keep special running backs versus just another guy.
Yeah, no, it's obviously a little bit down the line, but it's something worth thinking about, because I think these upcoming seasons you're going to be evaluating that exact question that you just brought up. Like, is he enough above your typical running back to be worth that? Because I think in general, like, I do lean towards the side of like running backs being the most replaceable position. I think the way they get paid, like, that's been a huge controversy with how like little they get paid. I think it makes sense when you consider their impact and how easily replaceable they've generally been. So, like, I think they're properly valued. I think it's the least important position on offense and defense. So generally, I do agree with the philosophy of draft guy, run them into the ground, draft another guy, and just keep getting young guys. That's when they're at their best. They peak early, and just keep that cycle going. So I really believe in that, and the Jets have kind of set themselves up for that with continuous drafting of running backs. But with all that being said, there are always a handful of guys in the league who are enough of a difference maker to put themselves above the rest of that pack and be the type of player who is worth paying money to, because they change your offense that much. And Breece Hall, when he's played so far, has been that type of player. You could argue that there's no running back in the league who's improved his team more than Breece Hall has, when you consider what he's done with the surroundings that he's had. I mean, he averages almost 5 yards per carry. He has been efficient as a receiver and a rusher, with all the obstacles that we don't need to regurgitate for the millionth time. So, like, and then you look at their offense, the difference in their record when he plays, their efficiency, like, everything is different just based on him. And there's not a lot of running backs who are capable of doing that, especially in that type of situation. So if he can do that again this year and live up to some of the expectations that we've laid out for him, like going near 2,000 scrimmage yards and being that type of player and taking what he's done and improving it as much as he potentially could, considering how much better the support around him is, then I think there is an argument that, like, maybe it's not the typical thing to do, but this guy is different. We should pay him. We need him to carry this offense for us long term. And also, he came into the league pretty young. He's still 23. He was 21 as a rookie. So that does give him a little more longevity into a second contract than most other running backs would. Plus, he was a second-round pick. So, you're extending him potentially, compared to a first-round pick who gets that 5th year, you could, extend him a little bit earlier. I'm just trying to make sure I'm thinking about that right. But regardless, he came in young. And, you could sign that second contract.
You could pay after year 3. You could pay after year 3.
Yeah. You could sign that second contract and you're signing him into 26, 27 years old. Mm-hmm. And if you're as special as it seems like he is, you could still be great up through that age. It's become less common, I think. Yeah. But when you're that good, it can happen. So yeah, I think this will be a huge season for determining that. If he can continue to take what he's done and build on it with the improved supporting cast and establish like he is as much of a difference maker as there is at running back, then yeah, I think he could push to the point where it's hard not to re-sign him.
So you said a lot there, but you didn't necessarily answer the question, Nania. So would you?
So would I?
Would I? You were the GM.
Based on
it's your decision. He has the season that you predict. Let's say 2,000 on the dot, all-purpose yards. He wants a contract. What are you doing? Because you're and like maybe it's not over Christian McCaffrey's. I think it's like $19 million, whatever it is, but like $16-17 million is a lot for a running back, where I could say in the same sense. And again, I'm probably more on the side of pay him, because I do think you could figure it out, especially not having a quarterback. Now, if you're paying him a Mahomes or something like that, maybe it's a different conversation. But the thing is, and I'm curious, I'm gonna follow up actually with something different. I'm not gonna try to overload you with questions right now, but in terms of Breece, like you can keep him for this year, right? Year 3, and then you have him for year 4, right? Or is it it's 4 years, right? And then you can tag him, right, for that 5th year if you really want him for the 5th year, and that number would probably only be, what's the running back tag right now? I don't know, 12 million, something like that. And then past that, even if you want to franchise tag him again, it's 125% of that last year or whatever it adds. So you're talking about year 5 costing, let's say, and again, this is a guesstimate, what it's going to be, like $13 million. And then year 6 would be like $16 million. So you're giving him almost like a 2-year extension at that point, but really it's 2 franchise tags back to back. So, is it almost like you could just replace that contract with getting franchise tag back to back, which doesn't necessarily make him happy, but maybe you can do it cheaper than signing him to a 4-year extension that probably only has about 2-3 years of guaranteed money anyway. Like, I don't know if you see what I'm saying there in terms of like, it'd probably be cheaper to make him less happy to just franchise tag him back to back. And you probably still have him for nearly the same amount of time. Maybe if you sign him to a 4-year extension, you keep him for that 3rd year, where after the 2 franchise tags, he's obviously out of here most likely. So is it worth it for more money to sign him for another year? Like it's a really interesting conversation with Breece Hall going forward for sure.
Yeah. So I think to answer the question, I think I would. And I'm going to be honest, it's not an easy decision for me, because I do lean pretty strongly on the anti-running back side, but I just think he's enough of a like difference maker to be worth it. And my definition of that is different than what it might be for some other people. It's not just what are your fantasy stats? What does the box score say? It's how much do you make the team better? And when you look at him and how he's able to exceed the blocking, these first 2 years, that's what being a great running back is to me, is can you get more out of the play than what's presented to you? And you look at the touchdown he scored against the Giants last year, and just various plays that he's made over these first 2 years, where he's taking plays that should be losses and turning them into like one drive touchdown or one play touchdown drives. And that's a difference maker to me. And I think with his age, it gives him the ability to do that. For you to extend him and still feel comfortable, you're going to continue getting that throughout that contract. So I lean towards that right now, but we'll see how the season goes. Obviously health is huge and all that, but I think this will be the best running back in the league when this season is over with. So I lean towards yes.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting conversation, because you can have him for that year 4, and you can have him for that year 4, and then basically let's say 13 million and 16 million. That's like a 2-year, $29 million extension where he's making $14.5 million per season. Whereas let's say you give him 4 years, 18 million per, then you get him for that extra year. Like, is it worth it for that much more of a price to keep him for that extra year? What would you trade if you could trade right now? Like, and obviously this can't happen. Like, we're living in fairy tale land right now, but what would you trade right now for that extra year of Breece Hall? Like, if the Jets could have traded an extra to get into the first round to pick Breece, because they tried to, right? They picked him at 38, but they tried to trade into the first round for him. I'm sure one of those reasons being they wanted him, but secondarily, it's like, hey, you get that extra year of control for Breece Hall. Like, what would you be willing to trade for an extra year of Breece Hall at this point?
Like in terms of draft picks, are you talking like in top of the end of the contract that he's on? Like what would that be worth?
Yeah, because like again, obviously fairy tale land, like we can't go back in time. But if you knew what he would be, and you knew we were having this conversation, like what would you trade just to have that extra year of Breece? So like, hey, if we could have given up this extra pick to get up to 32 to pick him.
I mean, I don't know if I would, maybe like a day 3 pick, but like I said, I mean, you also get him cheaper for these first few years, which helps. That's something that shouldn't be overlooked. And I also think that the being a shorter contract and potentially extending him earlier for a running back is good, because you kind of don't want to go that far out, because you do want to be more year to year with it and make sure you're still getting the guy in his prime. Because usually when running backs fall off, the thing with them is you could see it coming. Like we saw it with Dalvin. Other people didn't, but we saw it with Dalvin Cook and Le'Veon Bell. There were signs.
Nania, in his defense, he was in the Pro Bowl, though. He was in the Pro Bowl.
He was in the Pro Bowl.
He was in the Pro Bowl.
I think we're just very anti-Cook for no reason whatsoever. So yeah, like with running backs, you could usually kind of see it. It's usually not like, okay, they're great, and then suddenly they're awful. There's usually like gradual decline, like their yards per carry, whatever it is. You can kind of see it for a few years. So I think for a guy like Breece, extending him earlier because he's a second round pick kind of gives you that opportunity to like, all right, let's ride it out with him and be able to get out in front of this versus, first round pick going 5 years. Maybe you're stuck with him a little bit longer than you want to. I don't know. It's an interesting hypothetical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. Moving on to sacks. Nania, what I threw rush. Oh, we'll do rushing and sacks to you. Then I'll go for the next three, or the next two. I'll pick them up. But sacks for the Jets. Q, Reddick, JJ. Oh, actually, before we even get to that, I want to throw another question about Breece. If it is a situation, Breece versus JJ, because let's assume they keep Sauce, they keep Garrett Wilson, which Garrett Wilson's going to be an interesting conversation next year as well, because where does he finish? We think he could be a 1,500-yard guy, but if he had 1,000, 1,300, is he going to get paid $30 million like some of the other receivers, or $25 million, whatever it is? That's going to be interesting. But if they are in a situation where it's JJ versus Breece, would you lean more towards keeping JJ because of Saleh and how much they care about DNs? What would you think would happen there? Maybe I don't know if you want to do it from like your standpoint or the Jets standpoint, but regardless of however you want to take that.
Well, I mean, the hesitance to extend Reddick leans me towards thinking that they do see McDonald and at least JJ as a part of, that being the basis of their future on the edge. And obviously McDonald needs to go out there and prove it first, but I think JJ's already at least shown the floor of like, this is a long-term starter. So the fact that they haven't extended Reddick and they have these back-to-back first-round picks makes me think that they are already looking out ahead and thinking that this is their core duo. So I think a JJ extension is pretty likely. I still want to see what he does this year. Like, can he take another leap? Can he even sustain what he did last year? Because I think in terms of like the sacks, he definitely had a good number of sacks that weren't, clean one-on-one wins. So can he continue to do that? Can he build on that and maybe add some more of those? So I still think there's some evaluation to be done with him, potential room to grow. So we'll see what his value goes to. And if he is a player who, you want to extend versus potentially can you get better? So I still think there's information to be gained with him as a player. And same goes for McDonald. But I do think they're going to lean towards extending him. But I mean, Breece is a much better running back than he is an edge rusher. Mm-hmm. That goes without saying, and that'll never be a debate. But it's, edge is just an infinitely more valuable position. Like a $16 million edge rusher versus a running back is like, an above average guy versus one of the best. So I mean, they value it very highly. They have not valued running back very highly, generally speaking, outside of picking Hall. Like, they haven't taken one first round or signed many lucrative free agents long term. So it doesn't seem like they have an extremely high valuation of it. So I don't know. It's tough. It kind of feels like apples to oranges. Like how are these guys going to look a year from now? Still a lot to learn. I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think the Jets probably would value JJ over Hall, but it's a conversation, like you said. It's a perfect point. Like an average to solid DN is getting $16 million, where that's like a top flight running back. So like, what do they value more? Sorry for the dog barking, but yeah, I think they probably choose JJ, and it's part of it's like the reason that they don't have a lot of depth at DN right now, and especially if they're not going to sign a guy like Reddick or extend a guy like Reddick. They don't really only have JJ and McDonald at this point, who I feel confident about. Like even their depth after those guys, like I'm not confident in Watts or McGregor or whoever it may be. And if Reddick's gone next year, like they have another need at the end. So we'll see exactly what's going to happen with that. But in terms of sacks, Nania, who do you have as the sack leader for the Jets?
I don't think I've written down any sack predictions yet, so I'm going to kind of go off the cuff here, and I think I'm going to come pretty close to this once I do finally kind of sort it out. But my hunch is that Quinnen Williams is going to have a big bounce back in the sack column and get back to the top of the list, because I thought he was just as good last year, if not better. The fact that he had 5.5 was kind of fluky, so I think we'll see another 11, 12 sack season from him to get up top. I mean, do you think he'll get back to that? You got someone else up top?
Yeah, no. I think he'll get near there as well. I have Reddick at 13 for me, which is I think the two, because he's been top 5 the last 4 years, right? He's right up in there. So his best years he had like 15, 16, right? And then last year he had like 10, 11. So I kind of split the difference of those two extremes, extremes. So I think Reddick with 13 is going to be my prediction for who gets the top. And I think Q is probably sitting like in that 8, 9, 10 range, just because it's hard to do it. Like it's hard to do it when you're like that 3 tech, 2I, 1, whatever he's going to do.
Interior has a lot less control over sacks than edge rushers do.
Exactly. And I think Reddick does bring some, but then again, like that at a certain point, like Reddick probably gets more attention this year than Huff got last year, right? So you'd assume that it actually opened up Quinnen Williams more so than it did, or he's going to be more opened up to get sacks than he was last year, in my opinion. And on top of that, you also have teams who are going to need to pass the ball much more than they passed the ball versus the Jets last year. So I think his sack total definitely goes up, and Reddick does take attention away from him, and he'll have more opportunity to get sacks. So I think that's why his sacks will go up to, let's say, like 10 on the dot. But I do think Reddick probably leads with 13, just because he'll see less attention because of Q more so than vice versa. Like I don't think it's gonna be a thing where, hey, we're gonna double team Reddick instead of Q. Q is still gonna get the double team in my opinion, but maybe not though. At the same time, like thinking about it while I'm saying that, Reddick has produced more sacks than Quinnen Williams in the last couple of years. So maybe it's a thing where it's like some plays it's Reddick, some plays it's Q. So I think they're gonna play off of each other really well. But I would say if I had to, gun to my head, it's Reddick with 13, Q with like 10.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go inverse. I'm going to say I think like 10 right on the dot for Reddick. And part of that is I think he's going to play a lot fewer snaps than he was, because he was, I have it up here, 74%, 74, 83 his last 3 years. He's not going to come close to that with the Jets. It's probably going to be 60, high 50s. And we'll see how much of that is like, are they mostly going to take him off on the run versus what he used to do? But he'll play the same amount of snaps versus the pass. But with Will McDonald, I don't think, and I think he has potential against the run, but it's like, I think you would still probably rather have Reddick right now against the run than McDonald, right? So I think it'll be a pretty even balance in terms of both run and pass snaps that he'll lose, and McDonald's going to lean heavily towards the pass. So yeah, I think Reddick is going to play fewer snaps, and that might take away some sacks from him. But I think in terms of I think he's going to be more efficient than he was with the Eagles in terms of sacks, pressures, all of that, because he's going to play fewer snaps. He's going to be more well rested. He's going to drop into coverage less often than he was, because the Jets pretty much never do that with their D linemen, but the Eagles still had him doing it occasionally. So that takes away some opportunities for him. It's more he has to think about versus just rush the quarterback, which is the Jets mentality. So I think he's going to be a more efficient player than he was with the Eagles, but I think he's going to play less snaps. So maybe that will take the totals down a little bit. But yeah, I think he's going to be more. And you mentioned Quinnen Williams, and he had good D tackles with him with the Eagles as well. But I think Quinnen Williams, in terms of drawing doubles, is now the number one guy in the league now that Aaron Donald is out. So it's a different level. So yeah, I think he's going to have a more efficient year. Maybe less production in total because snaps will be down.
What's that number on the contract? It's like 68.5.
I think it's 67.5, which I think is a very specific number that they chose because that's right above what Jermaine Johnson was, and he was their top guy for snaps on the edge. So they're probably anticipating like, okay, that's the maximum. I think it was 66 JJ had. So they're like, that's the maximum. No one's playing more than that. So let's put it a little bit above that. He's not going to hit that number.
Yeah, I agree because like JJ's a guy you needed to have on the field on rundowns where Reddick's not. Like Reddick should be in every type of like pass rushing situation, but I'm not going to lose my shit if Reddick's not on the field and let's say Clemens is on the field for that I don't know 3rd and 2, like that short yardage type of situation. So obviously I think it'll be close to that, probably like 65. I think they'll hover, but it goes from a 4th to a 3rd, right? If they do that, so like I see there being no way that he goes above that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have the numbers handy for tackles for losses. I think last year I nailed it with Quincy. I think I said the year prior was like 11 and it was 11 or whatever. So this year I'm going to go with 12 tackles for loss for Quincy being my leaders for tackles for loss for the Jets. I think Q is probably close to lead the team. Oh, yeah. Okay. So he had 15. Damn. Okay. So he had 15 last year.
That's crazy because like you think a tackle for loss is basically a sack. I mean, sometimes it's like 1 or 2 yards. A sack can be like 10. But I mean, it's generally fewer yards, but still, it's a tackle behind the line of scrimmage. You had 15 of them, so imagine you had 15 sacks.
I think this is something that would get kind of almost opposite of sacks, though. I think last year they were in so many run situations where like Quincy could be really, really aggressive and like shooting gaps.
That's true, yeah.
I think teams will be put in more situations where they have to pass the ball, so he's not going to be able to be as aggressive. So I think he goes from 15 to let's say 13 for Quincy. Do you think it may be somebody else, Quincy? I could see it being Q too because his review like is just stacked with stops and tackles for losses as well. Q was dominant there as well. So I think it's if you probably have to protect one of those two guys. I think anything else is probably a little bit crazy, but between the two, who would you say and what's that number?
I think they'll both go down because that is a good point. They probably got a lot of them and like, okay, it's the end of the game. We're running the ball. Just go all out to stopping the run when it's 30-0. So they'll probably go down a little bit, but that doesn't take away from how great they obviously both were. I'm going to go with Quincy again. I just really like the progress that he's made. And I think what he did is sustainable. I think he is that type of player who's going to sustain that right now. So I'll say it's him with, let's say 12.
12. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think tackles I was way off. I said Mosley with 102, and I think he ended up having like 150 tackles or something like that. So I like completely blew the tackles. I'll split the difference of those two. Again, another thing where just like tackles for loss, I think it's a little bit easier for linebackers to get tackles when you're just running, what did Le'Veon Bell say about Gase? like 21 dive or 12 dive or whatever it was. I think the Jets were facing much more situations where they can just anticipate and get and shoot those gaps and get those tackles. So I think it's probably less than it was last year because I think the tackles you'll see more with the corners and safeties because people will be throwing the ball more. So I'll say it's going to be Mosley again. I'm going to say Mosley with 131 for whatever reason, more so splitting the difference between what I predicted last year and then what it actually was.
Yeah, I mean, tackles is hard to predict. I mean,
for sure.
What does it even mean if you're getting a lot of tackles? It's like my least favorite stat. It's like you could get toasted in coverage and tackle the guy. It's like, here's a tackle for you. It doesn't really. Yeah, exactly. It's like, if you're a good corner, you should be getting. If you have 0 tackles as a corner, you probably had a great game. So I don't know. It'll be one of those two guys. Mosley generally gets more. I'll go with him. Let's say he gets 140.
140. Okay. Yeah. So Now we're gonna get into like some of the ranks and some of the awards. And then we get into some of the stupid crap that I always enjoy. Offensive rank, I guess like DVOA is probably the best rank for offense, right? I don't know if it's PFF or ESPN Stats and Info or whatever we use. I legitimately, I do not have subscriptions to all that stuff, which I know it's like it's beneficial too, because it's nice to have those numbers, but I absolutely refuse to. So people be like, oh, well, the Jets rank this and this coverage that many times. I refuse to subscribe to those type of websites, so I never know. But offensive rank, I don't know where we finished last year, is probably relatively low. This
DVOA,
year
it was last. It was not only last, but it was the worst that the Jets have ever had.
That is surprising, considering we've watched Adam Gase years and all of that. And honestly, like to me, that's a new low, right? Like, and I don't know if it's, and this is probably crazy to say, and people may think I'm crazy for this. I'd rather have Adam Gase as an OC than Hackett. Like, and just in terms of scheming, at least Adam Gase, those teams came out what, like 7 games in a row, and scored like an opening drive touchdown or
down.
Or whatever. At least they can score a touchdown with them. Like with Hackett, they had more talent, right? Like, now, I would say, obviously, Darnold is better than both Boyle and Zach Wilson. Boyle and Zach Wilson is probably the worst 1-2 you're ever going to see in NFL history, which is crazy that the Jets, that's how they went into the year with, again, redshirting Zach Wilson, but him being number 2 for a 39-year-old quarterback. Again, just a dumb comment by the staff there, or dumb thinking by the staff. But nonetheless, yeah, Gase had more talent at quarterback, but the receivers weren't close. The running backs weren't close. The offensive line was legitimately 32nd in the league for Gase. Obviously, this year for the Jets, it was bad as well. But like, they had Andre Roberts and Frank Gore as like their number 2. You know, at least this team, Brashad Perriman. At least this team had, you had Chad Hansen and all those scrubs that they had. At least this team had, Breece. At least this team had, Garrett Wilson. For this team to be worse than the Gase years really talks about how bad, 1, Hackett was, and 2, how bad the quarterbacks were as well. Like the talent on those Gase teams was so much work, sans quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much every category, the 2020 offense was not significantly better, but they're better with guys like that on offense versus Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Tyler Conklin, which at least should have been enough to be 30th or 29th. So yeah, it's still very concerning to have, because that's the thing with Hackett, and it's very obviously we all want to buy into like Rodgers will overcome him, because we want to be optimistic. We're not going to, at least me, I'm not going to sit here and focus on the negatives, because I want it to work out. But the thing about last year that makes it hard to write off is, even independent of like, okay, Rodgers was out, obviously you're going to be worse, that the bar wasn't this low to be the worst offense, not only in the league, but potentially that the Jets have ever had. Like, you had more than enough to be well above that, and they fell even beneath that bar. So, so it's still concerning, the coaching, but
and with all that being said, they won 7 games. Like, they won 7 games. Yeah. So like, just be at least average this year. Like, even if the defense falls off a little bit, you're talking about a historically bad offense for the Jets, who have been terrible on offense. So offensive rank DVOA, what would you what do you think it's going to be after the year's all wrapped up?
I'm thinking it's going to land in like that lower top 10 range, like 8th, 9th. So I'm gonna say 8th. I'm gonna put them there.
I put it 10 right on the dot. And I think that's a Super Bowl winning type of year if you have the 10th ranked offense with what we're most likely going to predict for the defense. So, and part of the reason, like, in certain situations, let's say if the defense was just a, average defense, maybe we are talking about the Jets being, 5 or 6, because they put in a situation where you have to throw the ball more. But I just can't see this offense having to produce that much because of the defense. So with a bad defense to an average defense, maybe I'm talking about 5, 6, 7. But because the defense will be supporting them, and I don't think they have to put up some crazy numbers, I think they'll be like 10 on the dot.
Yeah.
We got a super. I do this first, because first super chat of the day. No Skills $50 super chat, appreciate it. No Skills says, sorry for off topic, but did you see Hackett interview on official Jets YouTube? That 10 minutes about how Rodgers can bail out an OC out of a bad call felt awkward with Hackett there.
I didn't see that. I saw the interview that came out, but I didn't watch it.
I'll be transparent. No Skills. So I tend to stray away from like player interviews and coach interviews just because they're all like really like 95% of the answer you could predict. They just say it in maybe a different way than you predict. So like it's 95% of what they're going to say before they even say it. With that being said, do I still watch it because like I cover the Jets? I want to see this. They say anything interesting. I can bring it up on YouTube. I do. But when I see Hackett is getting interviewed, like I couldn't care less what he says. So typically Saleh, Douglas player interviews at this point, like I'm starving for Jets content, starving for it. I'm not clicking on a Hackett interview. I really couldn't care less. So like it's funny because like I saw like, ooh, something the Jets put out. I saw again Hackett for 20 minutes, whatever. But I was like, I rather not. Like I rather just listen to Spotify random music. You know, I don't know. So I did not listen to it. Did you listen to it, Nania, or no?
I did not. I had the same reaction, and I feel especially like team site content. I mean, it's just the Kool-Aid factory over there.
That's so terrible.
Like, I'm not very interested, but I mean, Hackett seems like a fun, good guy. I don't think they're like he has the same issues like the way that Le'Veon Bell is just dunking on Gase. I don't know if Hackett's ever going to get that treatment because it seems like he has good relationships with the players. So at least you have that, but just purely results on the field, it's not a lot to cling on to. So there's still a lot to prove for him.
Which at first with Gase, with Bell and Gase, like it was funny, but now it's getting to the point where it's been like a little bit weird. Like it's spread out of a couple of weeks now. Like every day he's bringing up Gase. Like, okay, if you want to go off for like a day or two, like I could listen. I could see myself if I was a former player and I had a few shots of something like that, and I was a little bit drunk, like getting on a long rant on Twitter about how bad Gase was. But it seems like every single day this dude is waking up and thinking about Adam Gase. Like maybe you should let it go at this point. Getting a little bit on the creepier side, but nonetheless, it is funny though. Like to start the stream, we're talking about how we're starving for content, and starving for articles, right, and things like that. And we're talking about Jets players making Instagram or Instagram posts on their former quarterback, and we're not even watching Hackett interviews because we couldn't care that much. Yeah, that is bad. If you care about Zach Wilson's Instagram comments more than a Hackett interview, that just kind of speaks to the state of how much respect we have for Hackett at this point. But like you said, seems like a nice guy and stuff, but like he's been talking to Eric Allen, and they're going to try to fluff it up. And we're going to do this with Aaron Rodgers and that. I just don't believe anything he says. Like it took you 8 weeks to figure out Breece Hall can catch the ball. It's, I don't really, Micah Parsons is fast, right? Wasn't that the comment? Like, he's faster than we thought he was. It's like, he's a top 5 DN in the league right now. Like you should probably scout that a little bit, but I did not watch it. No, it's because I appreciate the super chat though, for sure. 10 minutes. Yeah, maybe I should watch it, but I really don't know if I want to. So offensive rank, I had 10, you had 8. Defensive rank, what are you gonna say for that, Nania? And what were we last year?
In DVOA, they were 3rd.
Okay.
I'm gonna say there's gonna be a slight drop. I'm gonna put them at 6th.
No, I don't know if you can you. So I got to take a phone call for like 2 minutes. If you could just hold it down for 2 minutes, I'm gonna jump off the camera.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, they were 3rd best in DVOA last year. I do think the run defense is going to go down. And whenever I've brought that up, I think some people have disagreed. But I'm not even saying it's going to be terrible. I just think that they did lose JFM, who I think was a big part of their success against the run because he's a great edge setter. And he didn't make a lot of tackles, but if you watch them against outside zone plays, especially, he did a great job of just anchoring down and disrupting the flow in those plays and channeling the runner back to the linebackers. So I think that's going to be a loss. I think the interior D tackles after Quinnen are all pretty shaky against the run, which I know Joe would attest to. In terms of Kinlaw, I don't think Fotu is great in terms of that role to play the same thing that Al Woods was doing for a few games. So there are some holes, but they have a lot of great run defenders too. You still have Quinnen, JJ, Quincy, Mosley. There's a lot of great pieces. So I think it'll be an average-ish, maybe below average run defense. But I think the pass defense will be similarly good. The cornerbacks are, there's no reason to expect decline from them. It's the best cornerback trio. I think the linebacker coverage is good. And safety, I like the upgrade from Chuck Clark or from Whitehead to Chuck Clark and what you could get out of that. So I think that at safety, there is the potential for you to upgrade, which could counteract some of the stuff that goes on against the run. So I think the defense might drop off a little bit just because of maybe there are a few games they struggle against the run. But overall, this is still. I mean, I don't know about 6th. Maybe I'm gonna push it up to 4th. I still love this pass defense, and I think it could be even better because the pass rush will get more situations or more opportunities to tee off in obvious passing situations, which they did not get to do last year because they were very rarely trailing or leading. They were trailing for most of the game. So your best strength, your pass rush, you could barely use because most fourth quarters, it was just run the whole time. And the few times we did get to see them, defend a lead in the clutch, they pretty much always came through, whether it was Denver, Buffalo in 2022,
Eagles,
Philly last year. They were really good in those situations.
Lions. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No,
yeah, that was great. But generally speaking, they have. But they've just barely gotten the opportunity to do it. So I feel like the pass defense could be, like the pass rush specifically, could be better, even with the loss of Huff and JFM. I believe in Will McDonald, Hassan Reddick. You're getting a double-digit sack guy there, so I think they could wash out those losses, maybe even improve depending on McDonald. So I think 6 maybe was a little harsh. I'm going to push them up a couple. They were 3rd last year. I'm going to keep them in the top 4. Let's say 4th, because I think I do have questions about the run defense. I think it's going to be below average. So I'll say run defense is 20.
The reason.
But I think the pass defense is going to be slightly better, as good as it already was.
And again, I don't know exactly how they quantify DVOA, if it's like yards or whatever.
Yeah, well, I like it because it's like very all encompassing. It accounts for down and distance, game situation.
So like turnovers,
strength of schedule, like turnover. It values everything how it should be valued. If you throw an interception, or if you have a drive that ends in a turnover, that's a harsh penalty. In the way that it should affect, the way that feels on a game day, you turn the ball over.
Do you think it's pretty valid?
Accounts for that in that way. So I think it's very valid because it accounts for a lot of different things versus total defense or total yards or whatever. That doesn't account for how you do in the red zone, how many turnovers you have.
Exactly.
Situationally, things like that. But DVOA accounts for what do you do in each situation versus average when considering all these things. So I like it because it's just very all encompassing. It accounts for all this stuff at once. So it's my favorite team ranking metric.
Well, again, and that's why I asked, how do they come up? What's the formula? Because if the Jets are, let's say, up 24-3 on the Pats and they drive the ball 70 yards and get 3 points, I would label that as a successful drive, for the Jets defense. In terms of taking up 8 minutes of the clock, 9 minutes of the clock, they nickel and dime you. Who cares if you're playing prevent, things like that? Or if they drive 80 yards, but you tighten down in the red zone, you get a pick. Does that? I don't know exactly again how they do it, but 3. That's actually I didn't know that was their number last year. That's what I predicted for this year. So they stay right at 3 for me in my prediction. So, but again, I do think they'll let up more yards than last year just because they're going to be passed on more. So, but past that, defensive rank you had 4, I had 3. Offensive rank you had 8, I had 10. Offensive, and these are relatively. Well, maybe not easy. These are actually kind of difficult at times because the Jets didn't necessarily draft somebody who's going to contribute right away on the offensive side of the ball. But offensive player or offensive rookie of the year for the Jets would go to who, if you had to predict?
This one, last year we didn't really have a very interesting rookie of the year races, but this year I think it'll be a lot more competitive.
I think there's an argument for all 3 of the guys that you're going to talk about. Yeah, I think there's an argument for all 3, right? Because Fashion, who's going to come in for 6 games, how good is he in those games? Allen's going to get, let's say, 12%. I predicted 12% of the carries. How good is he in those 12%? And then Corley is going to be, receiver 4 at the start, seemingly, and then maybe creep up to receiver 3. Again, we'll see exactly how they use him. So I think there's a legitimate conversation about all of them, and obviously in the real NFL award type deals, offensive rookie of the year wouldn't be an offensive lineman, but if Smith is not playing in 6 of those games, Fashion, who comes in and dominates in those 6 games, hey, he was a pretty damn good rookie, right? So I think there's a conversation with those 3 guys for sure.
I think I'm going to go with Olu because I think the bar for him to make a significant impact isn't he doesn't have to make amazing plays or be dominant for his impact to be valuable to the team. Because if he comes in and plays makes 6 starts and he's an average starter, you're going to be so thankful that they made that pick and that he was there to do that, because a backup is not supposed to play like an average starter. You're not supposed to have a first-round pick as your backup. That's better than what most teams have. Generally, your backup is supposed to be Max Mitchell, and he comes in and is just he like a bad tackle can ruin your entire offense on his own. So if Olu is able to come in and start 5-6 games, whatever it is, and in those games he's just average, that's your rookie year floor. Like, he's still going through growing pains. This is as bad as he'll be, and he's average, then I think that could save multiple games for the Jets that otherwise would be losses if you had a typical backup tackle in there. And as much as I like the other, guys on here, the skill guys, I don't think any of them are going to play enough, and unless there are injuries, to where they can make more of an impact than he can just by being a serviceable starter in a few games. So, and I think Olu will do that. I think he's capable of being an average starter this year if he has to play. So I'm going to go with him.
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty like smart thinking there. I'm going to say Corley just because again, how do you quantify it? But I think it's going to be a thing where he's going to be like he's going to be schemed up when he gets the ball. So I think he's going to be like pretty impactful when he actually does get the ball. I don't think he's going to get like a ton of volume, but when he does, it's going to be like high yards per catch and things like that. So I guess I say Corley and Fashion only plays, 5-6 games. And when he does, I think average is great for a more raw, like he's not a more raw prospect. He's raw in the run game. So if he comes in and plays average again, I think that's good. I think he'll maybe have a few more lumps than him being like average per se. So I'm going to say Corley. And then past that, we'll move on to defensive rookie of the year. Old dude says, which whatever. Come on, fellas. I love you both, but you're putting out this totally irrelevant content and have the balls to criticize Hackett's interview. Are you kidding me? I didn't criticize the Jets website for putting up Hackett interview. I didn't say the Jets are idiots for putting up this interview. I said that I personally did not want to watch the interview. How is that? That's very different. So that's you're reaching a little bit there, old dude. I'm saying I don't want to watch it. I didn't say the Jets are assholes for putting it out. Like, what does that mean? Nonetheless, moving past that. Defensive rookie, and last year for offensive rookie of the year, I predicted Tippmann. I was right there. There's not really much else there wasn't much else to predict last year. Defensive rookie of the year, I said McDonald. It was McDonald, right? There wasn't any other defender who made an impact as a rookie. This year, defensive rookie of the
what are the candidates? Stiggers versus
Key. Yeah, right. That's the only 2 defenders we talked about. So I guess if you had to pick between those 2, who's gonna see the larger role on defense? Stiggers or Key? Stiggers is probably corner 5 and Key is safety 4, if not making.
If he even makes the roster.
I would say I guess I'm gonna say Stiggers because he makes the roster.
Is it one of these undrafted guys though who might there's a one defensive Watts, right? Who is like a tweener, maybe makes the end of the defensive, or is it Leonard Taylor?
Well, Taylor's like more of the he's like more of like the D tackle, and then you have McGregor and Watts, right? I think Watts a little bit bigger than McGregor. Like he could play like base the end, where McGregor might just be like a specialist type of guy. I think he's a little bit more light. I could be wrong though. I'm not exactly sure on these guys' weights and stuff like that. But
to be honest, like I'm not familiar with any of these guys individually, but I think collectively, it's probably more likely to be one of these guys than Stiggers or Key. Yeah, I mean, like, even if there are injuries at cornerback, you're probably gonna see Eccles step up and play before he does, and then maybe even I know Alvarez moved to safety, but I feel like they'd probably move him back to corner before they played Stiggers because he's very raw. And then Key was the last pick of the draft, even though safety is wide open. So I think it might be cheating, but like I would group in these undrafted D linemen and say it's gonna be one of them. So I don't know, like. One of them might sneak in and make a couple sacks, or like one sack, even one sack might be enough to win this award.
They need a 4th D end, right? Like I'm not confident that Clemens is gonna like that the 4th D end in the Jet system gets some runs. So is that going to be a Watts or a McGregor over a guy like Clemens? Like Clemens he's not a lock to make the roster or get playing time, in my opinion. So I would love to see one of those guys beat him out and or obviously, you know, whoever it may be, whoever plays the best, like one of those guys step up and usurp him. You know, I'm not saying that Clemens can't get better necessarily, but based on what Clemens has done through 2 years, I'm not ecstatic about him being DN4 on this team. I don't think he's earned a spot on the roster. If one of those guys beat him out, you know, great for them. So yeah, I think that's a good point. Now, like really, if you have Isaiah Oliver, who's like your safety 4, corner 5, unless they keep five safeties, like in what world do they even keep Key? You know, because you're going to have Ashton Davis as the 4, right? Oliver is your safety 4, corner 5. So is the only way they keep Key, you think, if they keep 5 safeties, then it's like him versus JBC for that last spot?
Probably. I mean, it's a tough road because like Ashton Davis is back, like you said. If Oliver is playing safety, that Oliver playing safety is what makes it tough to see either JBC or Key making it. Because I don't know if I see more than 4 safeties on this roster with how much they like D-line depth. Running back looks like it's going to be pretty deep with 4 guys probably staying. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't see Key on the. I think he'll be a practice squad stash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Rich said this. We didn't really necessarily do this, so we can just do this now, I guess. But he said, I joined late. Can't wait to hear where you both rank the offensive line. That's the key to success this year. So before we get into the offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year, MVP, all that stuff, the offensive line, and again, I don't know if there's like a ranking system for them. I know PFF just put us at number 5, which might be concerning because PFF blows, but nonetheless, where would you put the offensive line again? However, you would personally quantify that, not necessarily PFF or Stats and Info or whatever. If you had your own grading scale, where do you think the Jets kind of fall?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how you quantify these because I mean, unfortunately, outside of PFF, like there really isn't much out there. So you kind of like it's really the only thing to quantify it. But like, I guess you just watch them and evaluate like how good is this offensive line? Like where would you put it hypothetically if you were to watch every offensive line? I guess that's how you would rate it. But obviously injuries are let's say there's no injuries. Let's evaluate it on that first and then maybe adjust.
Okay.
It. So if there were no injuries or a realistic amount of injuries, I'm saying. So Tyron Smith will miss his 3 games or whatever. Morgan Moses misses a couple. And
like 2 or 3 because of his age.
Yeah, and then like maybe there's 1 or 2 on the interior somewhere. So like normal amount of injuries. I would say this is I think that 5th ranking is fair. I mean, Tyron Smith is still elite. Morgan Moses is good. Elijah Vera-Tucker is do you think he's elite? Would you say he's elite? Because I would say very good. But I was like, yeah.
I would say very good. I'm not going to say elite yet. He still has some hiccups, and I think part of that comes from him moving from left guard to left tackle to right tackle to right guard. I think he's very good. Last year, there were some more disappointing plays than I wanted to see, but I think if you really are going to place him in one spot all year, by the midpoint to the end of the year, he would be more elite at that position. But right now, I would say he's just very solid.
Yeah, and then obviously at center, I think Joe Tippmann already showed you an average floor last year, so you assume or hope that he'll improve. And then John Simpson, that's one of my guys on this team. I love what I've seen from him. I love the analytics. On top of that, he has great pass blocking metrics, and that's not even what he's known for. So I think he's going to surprise and be a very solid player. But even if he is just average left guard, and left guard, and that's your worst starter, that I think is the strength of this offensive line. It doesn't have a weak link, and there aren't a lot of offensive lines in the league that have that. They might have 1 or 2 notable players that are stars, but there's always like a couple holes that can be exploited. And as long as you have one really big hole on your offensive line, that could drag the whole unit down in a given game. So I think that the lack of a hole plus having Olu as depth to cover up some of those missed games, I think I think it can legitimately be a top 5 offensive line. What do you think?
Okay, so you said top 5 considering health, but in the world of realism, like you said, Tyron Smith 3, 4, let's say 5, 6 games. Let's say Morgan Moses a game or 2. He's been relatively healthy. AVT, Listen, he's missed almost 2 full years in a row, or at least like 2 half a seasons, obviously a little bit more. So let's assume 3-4 games for him. Tippmann, hopefully healthy, knock on wood the entire year. Simpson, knock on wood the entire year. But assuming again, 5-6 games for Tyron, 2-3 games for Moses, 2-3-4 games for AVT. Like, where do you think they'll actually fall? Because we do have to consider health.
Yeah. All right. So my real world prediction is probably 12. I think that's a good middle ground because I think they have enough to, like, as long as it's not catastrophic, season-ending injuries, things like that. Like, the fact that they picked Olu, I think, massively raises the floor. I think, there's still enough collective talent to where even if, a guy or two is out for a little bit, there's still enough on the rest of the line to make it a formidable group. So I think 12th could, like, Tyron misses 6 games, Moses 3. Say maybe 1 or 2 apiece inside. I think he could still be 12th with those injuries.
I'm with you. I said 11. That's what I thought of. Just 11 right outside the top 10 because I do think they'll miss a few games. But like you said, considering health, when they are all on the field together, Tyron Smith is no lower than top 3, top 5 even if you're being a Jets hater, top 5 is the lowest you can. Unless you're just a hater and you're an idiot. He's an amazing player still. Like, I'm super nitpicky. I could not nitpick a lot of things about Tyron Smith's game. John Simpson to me is going to be at least like an average-ish type of guy. Joe Tippmann was average-ish last year. He's only going to improve. ABT, when healthy, is a very solid, top 10 right guard in my opinion. Morgan Moses is a top half of the league right tackle. Like, that's a very good starting offensive line. But considering injuries, there are going to be some of them. I said 11, kind of split the difference there. But considering some level of health, I think this offensive line, it's crazy too. Like, looking at the additions they made this year, not only do you get Morgan Moses, who at first we're like, okay, let's go into the draft. Cool. Morgan Moses, get a receiver. We're good. We'll draft Fashanu. Like, if I told you at the beginning of the offseason, and I'm going to put words in your mouth, but I know you would have said yes. If I told you Morgan Moses, Fashanu, Mike Williams, you sent the dotted line for that offseason.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to throw, because we had a lot of conversations on Slack. I'm only going to throw Tyron Smith on top of that. It's like, holy crap. Like, they got both the guys we wanted in free agency. So great offseason for the Jets in that aspect. But like, then also makes me think, how did they go into last year with Becton and Dwayne Brown? Considering they did all of this year, what changed? Like, did they just realize those guys were injured and old and sucked? Like, I'll still never understand how they went into last year with the tackle situation. And then with the receivers too, like, not only, again, Alan Lazard sucked with Green Bay. He sucked with the Jets. Obviously, he sucked more than we expected, but like, you added on Mike Williams to that group and Corley. Like, last year, Lazard was our 2. And obviously, Corey Davis retiring, a couple of weeks before the season, whatever, hurt them. But like, what were they thinking last year? I'll never understand what they did last year. So I'll say 11. Now, moving on to offensive, I'll say rookie of the year. I said Corley. I guess you're going to say Fashanu for the same reasons we kind of talked about before. There's no defenders. I know you're going to say Fashanu. I'll move past it. Offensive player of the year, which I think is different than most valuable. Obviously, like, most valuable is going to most likely just be Rodgers, right? Because he makes the biggest difference on the team. But I think offensive player of the year for me more so means like the best player at their position, on the team. So who would be your offensive player of the year for the Jets in 2024?
Also, quickly, by the way, I found some of our season predictions from Jets X Factor last year for most disappointing player. We had some interesting. Both of us nailed it. We had different picks. Oh, did you have these pulled up?
No, so I don't. So that's great that you'll have them for last year. So I'll throw them to you first. But we have a lot of those predictions, which it's already 6:10. So we'll lightning round some of those. That one then. Perfect, awesome.
Yeah, I'm after what I said about Breece earlier. Have to pick Breece. I think this is your RB1 in unanimously. However you evaluate that, I think that's what he'll be this year.
Yeah, I'm with you. We both said like near 2,000 all-purpose yards. Garrett Wilson, I think, will put himself in that conversation of like top 10 guys, maybe even again top 6, 7. He's probably like, based on, I'm just starting to do some like fantasy football stuff now, and obviously that doesn't necessarily mean who's the best, but he's like the 6th, 7th, 8th receiver off the board, and I think that's because like we know he's good. He just kind of has to put like the proof on paper, which again I think he will. So he'll be in that range. But I think Breece Hall, like you said. Maybe, McCaffrey might have more yardage than him. Maybe Bijan. I can't see anybody else really past that. So I think he's going to be a top 3 running back in the NFL this year. So I would say he's the offensive player of the year as well. Defensive player of the year for me, I'll go for. This is hard because like Q versus Sauce, like who's better at their position? I do think Sauce is probably the best corner in the NFL. I'm gonna say Sauce. I guess I think the love is spread out a little bit more on the defensive side or like on the pass as a pass rusher. I think Q will get those like 10, 11 sacks, whatever it may be, and Reddick gets like 13, 14, 12, whatever it's going to be. But I do think Sauce is probably the number 1 corner in the NFL right now, and he holds down that spot where Q is in the conversation for in the top 3, right? That's like him and Chris Jones and probably Lawrence as your top 3. But I think Sauce is going to kind of cement himself as like number 1. I think he probably already is number 1, but I think he stays there where Q is kind of more questionable in the top 3 type of deal.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'm going to go with Sauce just because of what you said. I think relative to their position, it's a little more unanimous with Sauce than it is with Quinnen. So I'm going to go with him. And I think younger in his career, I think he still has more room for growth because I think there are still some ways he can get better. He's capable of adding more interceptions than he's had. He's dropped some. His tackle can be a little bit better. So I still think he can be even better. So I'm going to go with him.
Yeah, that's the thing where like in terms of the stats next year, he may give up more yards and stuff like that because they're playing more prevent, whatever it may be. But I think his interceptions skyrocket. Did he have 1 pick last year? Right? I don't remember.
He did, right?
I don't know. Actually, I don't remember what game that was.
Was there one against Kansas City that got called back? It was him who had it, right? Or was it Carter?
No,
it was Carter, and he had the penalty, right? Yeah, he had 0 last year.
He had 0.
But it doesn't matter. It's not
I mean, the first year
he's capable of getting more, and you would like for him to get more because he did drop a couple. But yeah, like it doesn't bother me much when you're as dominant as in coverage as he is. But but yeah, I think he will see a spike next year because you'll see more desperation passes against the Jets because quarterbacks just aren't doing that against this team. As good as their pass rush is at creating pressure, like quarterbacks don't do a lot of like really the whole team hasn't gotten a lot of interceptions. That whole cornerback trio hasn't been great, even though they're the best in the league. They haven't got many interceptions because quarterbacks just don't take a lot of chances against this team because you don't have to. But this year, or you haven't had to. This year you will. So I could see that. I could see him getting 2 or 3 this year. But either way, I don't evaluate him on that. I just care about the coverage overall.
Yeah, exactly. Again, hard to quantify. MVP, I think we're both going to say Rodgers, right? Like he's going to be easily the most valuable player on the team because of the difference. Like, hey, if he goes out of the game, you're screwed. Like we really have, I guess we have Tyrod, but still, he's the most valuable player on the team. Even though he's not the best on the team, I would say he's the most valuable player, right? There's really not much of a conversation there.
No conversation there.
Yeah. So now we get into some of the more stupid superlatives. This is gonna be the one where what was his name? Who's mad at us? Old dude? No, was it old dude? Yeah, old dude's gonna be really mad at us because now this is gonna be really, really irrelevant. Even though stat predictions are
cancel this section. Relevant, right? Pull up the Hackett interview.
Yeah, old dude, close it out now. This is gonna get super, super irrelevant. So you don't want to listen here. These are more stupid. These are stuff that Kyle and I just have talked about over the years, and we decided to throw it in. Some of them are really dumb. Some of them are not so dumb. And I've kept the same order for 5 years, and I just keep doing the same Word document. Who is the strongest player on the Jets per square inch, Nania? So there's a difference. Like, obviously, like Al Woods was the strongest player on the team last year, but maybe per square inch, he's not the strongest player. So like relative to their size, who do you like Jarvis Landry would be a good one, right? Like when he was a strong player when he was on the team, or Brodney Poole from a couple of years ago was like a strong guy, is small, but smaller. So per square inch, who do you think is the strongest player on the team?
I think my previous answer for this, I'm pretty sure I got asked this last time, or last season. I think I said Jordan Whitehead, so that's off the table. How about Braylon Allen? I mean, I know for a running back, obviously he's big, but relative to the linemen on the team, he's smaller. But I mean he looks like a tight end. So I mean maybe he's not the greatest answer, like I said, because isn't he like 230? So like the weight is there for a running back, but still as a running back, packing the punch that he does. I don't know. Who's your pick?
I said Reed last year. I think the answer is I think Braylon Allen's a good one. I think Quincy is another really good one because that guy will run over, offensive linemen at 230, 235, which is ridiculous. Sherwood's another good one. But if I had to say, I think it's probably Quincy is probably the strongest relative to his size. Like the dude's just a monster taking on, 300-pound offensive linemen with ease at times. So I would say him. Weakest per square inch. Last year I said Carter Warren. Who would be your weakest per square inch / pound? Again, now people are there's always that guy in the comments like those guys can bench this. You're a pussy compared to them. Yes, I understand that. It's all relative to the NFL players.
Comparing them to the NFL players.
So
not
when
us.
I say Allen Lazard is not athletic, I am saying Allen Lazard is not athletic as compared to another NFL player. Yes, Allen Lazard would beat me in a foot race. Like, can we not be crazy here in the comments? So let me preface this by saying that this is all relative. I'm not calling Carter Warren soft or anything like that. Relative to NFL players, he's soft as baby shit, though. Can we establish that? So he was my softest per square inch, weakest per square inch last year. Who is your weakest per square inch player?
Are you sticking with him, or do you have a new pick because you can't repeat?
So no, I can repeat it. I obviously can repeat, but my answer would be Max Mitchell. He overtook him.
That's what I was gonna go.
Okay.
That's what I was gonna. If I had to pick another one, I all right. This might be a hot take. What do you think about Sauce? Because I mean, there's like pure power.
Yeah, but he's like 190, 6'3", though. He's very lanky. So
true.
He's not weak. He's not weak relative to his size because his size wouldn't indicate that he should tackle anyway, I would say. And like he laid some hits last year. Like he had that hit on I think he made a tackle on Barkley the one time. He almost got trucked by somebody lower the shoulder. So there was actually some plays where he got physical with guys last year. So I would say because of his
great
height,
physicality, I think he's capable of great tackle.
Yeah.
But I was just picturing like body type because he is like really lanky compared to.
But that kind of
that goes to the build.
That's the point of the question. The point of the question, you could say Tyree Cohen, but you would anticipate him being more like weak because he's a smaller guy. Like Sauce is a lanky guy; he's never going to be like Revis tackling, right? So I would say Sauce wouldn't be there.
Max Mitchell is the pick.
Max Mitchell.
Sorry, Max Mitchell.
Honestly, and I think he does have the capability. I thought you might say Leaky Photo in terms of like per square inch. He's a lot of pounds, but he's not the strongest guy for 330. Yeah. Most likely to finger wag a dropped pass was one of ours from last year. Nania, who is the player who's most likely to finger wag Kyle Wilson a dropped pass?
It's Reed. I think it's Reed pretty clearly. He's probably their most active celebrator, or whatever term you would use there, out of their corners, I would say, right?
Yeah. I'm with you.
Last year would have been Whitehead.
Last year was Whitehead. I think even Quincy at times sometimes like would do that, but I didn't really see him do that a lot last year. He celebrated when he was deserved of so. So yeah, I would say Reed as well. Funniest, I went with Q with this one. I think he's the guy who entertains me the most. I think he's probably the most like lighthearted and fun guy to be around. So yeah, I would say Q for the most amusing Jet on the team.
Q's a good pick. I think Sauce is a candidate too. He's pretty good. I mean, maybe he's a little more active on Twitter than you would like. Although his whole golf thing that's cool. I like that whole thing that he has going on.
Can we not do that in Lightning though? Because I love Sauce. I love him. He's golfing. I love all this stuff. But doing it in the middle of a lightning, like an aggressive, severe lightning storm, is
that's just the work ethic. Bit aggressive. That's what got him to this point. Like
he's holding a metal club though.
When he was in high school in the Lightning in Detroit. So that's how he got here. But yeah, that's. The club definitely. It amplifies it a little bit. It's sketchy.
I don't necessarily love that for Sauce. So let's do that when it's nice and not thunderstorming outside. But I said
Michael Clemens is kind of funny. I know you don't like him on the field, but
hey,
I don't know.
We all have different answers. This one's kind of like hard. I don't know. Like fast is a kind of all encompassing words because when you say fast, do you mean straight line or do you mean quick? Because I think there are different answers. I would say like if you're gonna answer both of them, I would say the fastest Jet like in a straight line is probably Izzy. If he had, it's probably Izzy, right? But like if you're gonna say fast, it's just like overall like Tyreek Hill is fast and twitchy, but like in terms of like twitchiness and fastness, I would probably say. I don't know. It's probably really like Cohen or Grant, right? If you had to guess out of those guys, but I put Izzy for fastest. Last year was Harbin
on the roster. Didn't they I don't think he got signed after that. I think
okay.
So.
Oh, it was like a camp tryout?
He tried out. I don't think he signed.
Okay. So Cohen versus Izzy for like fastest. Again, I don't know how you quantify it necessarily, but straight line, I'll probably say it's Izzy. But in the phone booth, it's probably Cohen, even though I haven't really seen anything from him in terms of like actually, seeing it with my own eyes.
Yeah, probably Izzy. Like I was trying to think, or what about Breece? I mean, in terms, I don't think Izzy has the 40 time, or it wasn't on this website. I could try to look it up, but I mean, what was Breece's 40? He had a
4.38, 4.39, I think, something like that. A little bit high 4.3s, I believe it was, or if not
4.39.
Okay.
They're saying Izzy low 4.3s. He claims 4.26 to 4.32. I guess
Eccles
him, though.
Right?
It's probably him. Yeah, Eccles had a good one. I would say it's probably Izzy, though.
I put in here slowest as well. I'm trying to think of who is like literally like the slow, and this is not slow per square inch. We have that, but like who would lose in a foot race between all of the Jets? You lined up all 53 man on the roster. Who loses that foot race? It's probably, is it Aaron Rodgers? It's probably Aaron Rodgers, right?
Probably.
Do you think Aaron Rodgers could beat Leaky Fotu in a foot race though? I don't know.
I mean, he did have really good. He was above average quarterback at one point. So, and quarterbacks are faster than linemen generally. So, like, what stage is he at this point?
But what is Rodgers running as a 40 right now? Like, I would say like probably like a 5.2. Like, is he running any faster than a 5.2, 5.3?
There's got to be some lineman who's like a 5.4, 5.5 guy.
Who though? Because
what about Xavier Newman? I don't know.
Okay.
What about Tyron Smith? Like, no, I mean, he's really athletic.
No. He can run open field. Oh yeah, no, he can run. He could definitely run. So I would say it's probably Rodgers versus Xavier Newman, right? And we're just gonna go with Xavier Newman because we don't want to be negative on Aaron Rodgers. Is that okay?
Yep.
All right. Fastest per square inch now we have. So the fastest player relative to their size. Last year, Kuntz. Yeah,
he is the RAS god. That's all he has going for him.
That is true. I think you're probably right. Actually, with Kuntz, I actually put Tyron Smith up here, but I think Kuntz is probably the fastest.
4.55 at 255, 6'7". Kind of hard to go against that.
Yeah, Becton was an easy shoe in last year, like in terms of like relative to his size. Like Becton is a freak athlete. But
Sauce, yeah, I think Sauce is a good one at his height. It was pretty rare to see him. The way he moves is pretty rare. If you're talking height versus weight, I think Sauce is there.
Which is hilarious because I saw like I don't know exactly what judges this, but it was like his production score and his athletic score, whatever for the draft. Like it was a draft clip, and his athleticism score is like a 74. It's like that is absolute bullshit. Like relative to his size, like he's a stud athlete. Like he's an A+ athlete. So 74 production or athleticism scores is stupid for Sauce.
So get that because he didn't even do the full combine testing.
I don't know what website it was or what exactly it was, but like you've seen that for like the draft tickers and like this guy is 99 production, this athleticism, but it was like a 70 something. I'm like, how for Sauce? It's whatever your metric is that judges that, it's wrong because Sauce is not a 74 to me is like kind of related to like grades. It's like that's like a C grade. Like he's an average athlete, maybe a plus average athlete. Like that is in no world is he just an average athlete. He's an elite athlete. So Sauce is another one. Slowest per square inch, I said Lazard, and I am sticking with Lazard. Lazard is the worst athlete on the team, in my opinion. So would you agree with that, or do you have somebody else?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to top that one. Let's go with Lazard.
Yeah, biggest hitter on the team. I'm gonna say Quincy. I don't think you would have a different answer than that, right? Like the dude can literally truck over offensive linemen at some point. I think another guy too, who might be a little bit underrated in terms of some of like their power and their specifically like stopping power in terms of like a running back running at them and them just stopping them is Sherwood. Sherwood's pretty damn strong relative to his size. Like he's only 230, 235, but he holds up pretty well in the trenches. I think Nania froze. Yep, Nania froze unless he's just really thinking very, very hard about his answer. So hopefully we will have him back, and hopefully it is not me who is frozen, but I can't tell. I would say something in the chat to throw it in there, but the chat is not overly lively today. I know it's obviously a random day, Tuesday at 6 o'clock. I don't really have a set time, but nonetheless, if you could let me know if I'm live, then that would be great because Nania is not here, so it's Nania. Yeah, so slowest. I had Lazard. Biggest hitter, again, just doing some like fun superlative stuff. I had Quincy Williams. I think Nania would probably agree. I don't see anybody else. Again, Sherwood is up there, I would say. Best hands is another one. Yeah, simple eat switch up. I appreciate that, putting them in the chat. Best hands last year had Cobb, which was wrong. His hands weren't great, even though I don't think he really had a ton of opportunity. This year, I'm going to go with Mike Williams, who I believe only had like a drop or two his last like full year. I could be wrong on the number there, but he makes some ridiculous catches, and he doesn't really drop the ball a lot unless it's like a few and far between, like lack in concentration type of drop. Those show up sometimes for Mike Williams, but I still think his hands are probably the best on the team. I can't really think of anybody else in terms of receiver core who doesn't drop balls. Like you have Garrett Wilson, who is prone to a drop or two. Corley, he'll drop some balls. Gibson obviously hasn't had a ton of opportunity to necessarily show off his hands, so I'm not necessarily confident in them. Lazard, his hands are gross, so we know that. So I would say Mike Williams, and I would say probably past Mike Williams, it might be Conklin in terms of like confidence in just catching the ball that's thrown to you. A ball is right on your face, right in your chest. I think it would probably be Conklin as the number two behind Mike Williams there. And once Nania comes back, if he does, hopefully he didn't have like internet problems or whatever, we'll run through him quickly with him as well. But I'll keep going through mine for now, because this is what we're doing. Slowest per, okay, yeah, I had that as Lazard as well. Slowest overall on the team, I had last year Al Woods. I think this year it's probably Xavier Newman, because I think he's probably the second backup interior offensive lineman, which I still think should kind of show you that, like, hey, we need somebody else here. I'm not confident in Schweitzer being the backup left guard, center, and right guard at this point, because, hey, shit, we had to play with 13 different offensive lines last year. What happens if both, let's just say one of Simpson or Tippmann are down and AVT's down? You have Schweitzer and Newman in there. Is that enough? Is that enough? No, in my opinion. And then past that, Schweitzer is not even a guy that I would.
You hear it?
I can hear you. Definitely sound like you're in an ocean, and I heard a echo for a second too. So I don't know. Did your computer die?
My power went out.
Your power went out. Okay, so I can hear you.
Is it too bad?
No. I would say it's fine. You have a little bit of a delay, and there is a little bit of like it sounds like you're almost close to another like electronic device. Like there's like that like buzzing sound. I don't know if you can hear that in your side, but I can hear. Yeah. No, you should be fine. I guess we'll try it out. You should be fine.
All right, we'll do it a little bit. If it's not worth it, just let me know. Because
yeah. Okay.
Like my power is out. That's the only way I could do it. But all right, where do we pick up?
So what we'll do then, we'll kind of adjust it. I would throw out shorter answers, Nania, just because it is the audio is a little bit bad, but I still want to get your answers, just maybe a little bit shorter ones. But we should do lightning round anyway. So the ones I just did were we did slowest per square inch. That was Lazard. I did biggest hitter, best hands. Biggest hitter and best hands. Who would be your answer for those?
How about now? Is audio better?
Okay, yeah, the audio is much better now.
Okay. So biggest hitter, perfect. Definitely has to be Quincy. Best hands.
Okay. Yep.
Conklin. I think Conklin right now, right?
Yeah. So I don't know what you did with the audio, Nania, but like it's perfect right now. Like it sounds completely perfect. So don't worry about shortchanging your answers now.
Okay, awesome.
Never mind. Okay,
I just picked Conklin over Garrett because like I feel like we both said the contested catching is something he can improve. Whereas with Conklin, I think relative to tight ends, like Conklin has it down in terms of drops, contested. I think it's all there. So that's why he came to mind for me. Like, would you agree, or would you still go Garrett?
So no, it wasn't even Garrett. My answer is actually Mike Williams.
Okay.
It was over Garrett. I think he only had like one or two drops his last year that he played full time, right? So I said Mike Williams, and the funny thing is I said if I had to answer who would be the second guy there, it's Conklin. So you said my number two there. So I think those are easily the two, because Garrett Wilson is prone to like some easy drops. I said I haven't seen enough of Gibson to say he has good or bad hands. And then Corley he had some drops in college as well. So I think those are easily the top two in terms of like best hands. Now, I'm not saying that I'm taking, Conklin on a deep ball versus Garrett Wilson necessarily, but, Conklin was consistent when the ball was near him. So those two guys. And then we had biggest hitter. I said Quincy. I don't think you can't say anything else other than Quincy, right? In terms of the biggest hitter on the Jets.
No other option for sure.
So again, this is relative to NFL players. I do not want anybody to get mad at me here. The softest on the team. I think there's only two answers you can go with who I would say here. You're going to say the same thing. It's Max Mitchell or Carter Warren, right? Those guys are both relative.
Well, what about Lazard? Is Lazard in this conversation?
Like he's a willing blocker though. Like could you say soft for his mindset last year and like giving up?
He did like quit on a lot of plays though. I know he can be a good blocker, but
like soft mentality.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think Lazard. I think any one of Lazard, Max Mitchell, or Carter Warren, Max Mitchell, or Lazard are really your only answers there, right? So any one of the three, I think, qualify. So I don't want to say the hardest yet, but I would say like the toughest. I think it's probably Quincy again, right? Like in terms of just being an absolute like fierce competitor, not scared of anything. Quincy Williams is willing to throw his helmet right into a 330-pound offensive lineman's chest. So in terms of like, again, tough, I think it has to be Quincy.
Yeah, he's a good pick. I thought Jermaine Johnson came to mind too.
That's a good one too.
I like Ruckert. Because obviously, like you broke down in your review, the blocking isn't perfect yet. But I think in terms of just pure toughness, like I think the willingness that he shows and like actually wanting to get into it with guys, I think is very high up there. So he comes to mind. Mm-hmm. John Simpson, I think, is a good one.
Yeah.
So those are a few.
Yeah, those are good ones. I think also another underrated one, and maybe I'm like not blowing up his spot a little bit, but like Sherwood's another tough guy too. Like I've seen him take on some blocks and stuff like that with some like real like severe physicality. So running through the next few, this is a good one because I think there's quite a few answers here, and I think realistically, like you probably have to have this guy number one. So we'll kind of talk about the number 2 or 3 guys as well. But the most pressure on them this year. It's Rodgers, right? Like he has the most pressure. He's the quarterback. I think the quarterback for every team probably has the most pressure on them. But past Rodgers, who would you say has the most pressure on them? And there's quite a few answers for this one if you really break it down.
Yeah, I think Reddick is one that comes to mind. I mean, contract year for him. And I think obviously with this saga, he's raised the stakes a little bit more because he's, brought more attention to it. So he comes to mind. On top of that, Mike Williams, contract year, Tyron Smith, they got a lot of veterans in contract years with a lot to prove. I think Elijah Vera Tucker is a really underrated one because a lot of potential, but obviously needs to stay healthy and really establish it before his extension time comes up. So those are a few. How about you?
Yeah. The funny thing is, like, I literally had AVT and Reddick as the next, like AVT because he got the contract and he needs to stay healthy. Like it's at a certain point, like, hey, we kind of write off those 2 years, but if it's 3 years of season-ending injuries, like, what are you going to do with the guy? Like, you can't keep him on the team as more than like, a depth option or as like a hopeful. Reddick is another really good answer because he's performing for a contract. Mike Williams to be the Jets number 2 is a big pressure spot because if he's hurt, like who is that guy for the Jets? That's a huge one. And then even past that, McDonald, I think is in a big spot. Like, hey, it's your second year. You didn't do much. I think that's another one. JJ. He's going to be your primary starting defensive end now. Like he's another guy with a ton of pressure. And then another, like the last one that I wrote down, because I think, again, there's quite a few answers. Obviously you have Salah, right? But we're talking about like more of the roster. Kinlaw, like who is that second defensive tackle?
Yeah, that was another one I was going to bring up. Even if it's not financial, but like he's a lot to prove to, I think, doubters like you and I both are.
Yeah, exactly. So moving on, I got a lightning round it a little bit because I got dinner in a little bit. First time going out in like 3 weeks, so I'm gonna definitely have some margaritas or something, get a little buzz going. As a parent, you don't get that a lot, so I'm excited. So we did most pressure. I did this one last year, weird, and I don't think the answer is ever going to change until he's off the team. I think Mosley has, like, you've seen a lot of things like interviews, whatever it is. I think he's a relatively odd dude. So I said weird. Weird was Mosley. I don't know if you've ever seen some of his interviews, and he just seems a little bit off at times. Like he'd be the guy who, out of every single player on the team, if I was stuck in a room with him, I think we'd have a conversation for like a few minutes about football, and then it'd just be so awkward after that. Where like you could talk to Q, you could talk to Sauce, like but I feel like Moses gives off like he's a kind of like an odd dude type of vibes.
I see what you're saying. I know. I definitely remember you choosing this in the past.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else stands out as particularly weird. I mean, like we said before, neither of us are big time interview watchers, so I'm not extremely dialed in.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'll steal yours with Mosley.
Okay. Yeah, I think like there's a difference between like weird. Like Mosley's like a little bit off to me. Where like Tyron Smith's probably not the most like interesting dude. Like he seems pretty reserved. Like there's guys who might be more reserved, but Mosley gives me like he's just a little bit odd to me vibes. Who is the most overrated Jet in Michael Nani's opinion?
Let's see. We had some easy choices last year, which turned out pretty well. Some of them.
Yeah, I think my last year was Clemens and Uzama, and then they both.
I think a couple come to mind. I think Mosley is overrated in the sense that like maybe to some fans he's like still like A1 top tier superstar linebacker. I think he's good / very good, maybe not quite to the superstar extent. And I think AVT maybe very good, but maybe has a little more to prove on the field, not just in terms of health, than I think maybe some other people think. I mean, who's your pick?
Yeah, I think AVT is a good one too, because like we're just like kind of people are like assuming health with him, but he hasn't been healthy. And this is like maybe this is a reach because I really feel like Jets fans aren't. I feel like they rate their guys like relatively well. I think Ashton Davis has been overrated by fans a little bit. Like what he did last year might be a little bit overrated, so that would be my guy if I had to pick one. Underrated. Who do you have underrated? The most underrated Jet?
John Simpson.
2024.
John Simpson. Yeah, that's my dude.
I knew that one. Yeah,
I'm gonna go all in with that this year. That's my shtick. Last year was anti-Cook. This year it's pro Simpson.
Mm-hmm.
Also, my power's out. I have no way to charge my phone. It's about to die. So,
okay, so we'll really lightning round these. Which how much percent do you have on that?
1%, baby. Oh,
okay, you're out. I'll catch you later, Nania. I'll
all right. Sorry.
Anyway. No, it's okay. It's okay. Power went out. Can't help it. So for underrated, I have Conklin. I think a lot of people know that I value him pretty highly. Tippmann is the oddest dude on the team. Saw the rookie performance. Oh, okay. I don't know. I think that's just like an awkward spot to be in for that Rivka says, but I think everybody's awkward in that spot. Ashton gets picks, but definitely don't want him as a full-time guy. Yeah. And I think people talk about Ashton Davis like they want him as like more of a full-time guy because him in that role. His last year wasn't so impressive to me. Underrated, simply it's for Chuck Clark is a good one. I just got to see the health, but I am with that. Hold on. I'm trying to think who I have. Conklin's mine though. Nani, would you agree if you had to say somebody really quickly before your phone dies? Who would you say for
underrated or?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which one?
Underrated.
Oh, fuck.
Oh, okay. It died. It officially died. Underrated. I have Conklin, Simpson, and I think McDonald are other good answers. Chuck Clark's a good one. Overrated draft pick I did last year. I said Carter Warren. I think that kind of came to fruition. We saw Carter Warren struggled quite a bit this year. And this is going to be hard because like nobody's overrating Jalen Key, right? Nobody's overrating Stiggers. Maybe it's Stiggers. I think it's a little bit of a cop-out to say him because I don't think a lot of people have him like so highly rated. I think Braylon Allen might be a little bit overrated by fans right now. Like I wouldn't anticipate him coming in and just like completely dominating like some people think he's going to. And I think part of that is like seeing the highlights, seeing the camp reviews of him. I would temper expectations a little bit on Braylon Allen. He can be frustrating like rep to rep. So him or I would say Stiggers. I'm not going to win in any way with Jets fans with that one. Saying a draft pick's overrated is a hard thing to say, but I would probably say it's Allen or Stiggers. Stiggers was good in the CFL. He wasn't some like elite type of prospect. I don't know. So I would say one of them. Underrated draft pick for this year. I say Isaiah Davis. I think he's a little better than people realize. I liked his film quite a bit. Breakout on offense last year. I said Conklin. He didn't break out because of the quarterback. But I'm going to say Conklin again for this year's breakout player who people are like really recognized as a better player than some people think he is. Even if the yards and the targets aren't up, I think he's going to be much more efficient. So I would say him. Many fans think Corley will compete for wide receiver 2. That's overrated. Yeah, I think that's another good one. Yeah, that's a good one, Rivka, as well. I could see that for sure. breakout on offense? Yeah, Conklin, breakout on defense. I think everybody on defense is like kind of already broken out, right? So I think your only answer can be like Sherwood, Tony Adams. Maybe Tony Adams plants himself as like a average level safety, which I think is kind of a breakout year for him in his second full-time year. Most disappointing, I put in here as a new one, most disappointing Jet for this year. It might be, I don't even know. I don't even know who like the most. I'm just trying to think again who's going to have like a disappointing year relative to expectations. Maybe one of the running backs. Maybe it's a guy like a Braylon Allen. Like I don't think he's going to get a ton of carries and have like a huge receiving year or rushing year. Maybe Kinlaw. I could see Kinlaw disappointing from some Jets fans. I'm gonna say Kinlaw actually. I think Kinlaw is maybe overrated because of his draft status and people just assuming Saleh could kind of make him better than he is. McDonald's an underrated guy. Yeah, I see that as well. I think his rookie year was better than some people realize, for sure. Favorite current Jet. This is something that I think is really easy for me. And it's not always the best guy for me. Like I've liked the Cotries and Leon Washingtons, who weren't the best player on the team. They were one of the best players, but for me, it's Sauce. It's Sauce and Q. Both guys who I stand for hard in their drafts. Q was an easy one. Like a lot of people liked Q, but a lot of people were saying, oh, it's not, the value's not there at defensive tackle. I thought he was going to be one of the better defensive tackles in the league. He is. I love Q. I love the personality. I love who he is off the field. So Q, and then Sauce is another guy who I clamored for before most. They picked him. He dominated, makes me look good. And I think he's an elite dude in terms of like on the field, off the field. So Q and Sauce, hard to pick between those two, but those are my two favorite Jets. Most disappointing might be Reddick. Mike Williams. I don't know. Let's see. It's funny that the chat's going on a lit's bit. Let Joe cook. More important to give us 17 games, Tyron or Elijah? That's a really good question, Daniel. Probably Elijah, right? Because you know what I'm going to say. Tyron has a backup in Fashanu. We're already anticipating him having 3, 4, 5 games missed. Elijah Vera Tucker misses games. You have Schweitzer. Is the drop-off between Tyron to Fashanu smaller than the drop-off between Elijah Vera Tucker to Schweitzer? I would say it's more important that AVT gives us more time. Now, again, that's because of who the backup is. Again, I'm taking Fashanu at left tackle over Schweitzer at right guard. That's the reason for that. I'm with you for the amount of McDonald was out there. He didn't disappoint me. No, I'll play a highlight clip of him a little bit later or something like that, or a different stream, Bonesy, but he was good. I did the review of him, came out, I don't know how long ago. He was definitely good. Dano says, I believe Adams and Clark perform great in tandem. They're both are stronger in opposite ways. Clark is a grizzled vet who's reliable and a short tackler. Mind you, Clark played with CJ Mosley in 18. I like Clark's film a lot coming from the Ravens. It's just how does he rebound after tearing the ACL? Now, with that being said, Clark was never a guy who won based off of athleticism. So he was more technique and mentality, and he has that still. So I think he'll be fine as long as you're assuming some baseline level of health and he returns back to form. Least favorite Jet last year had Becton. I hated Becton. I still don't like Becton. Lazard is the new number one. We all hate Lazard, right? Let's see. Do you like Clark as a deep safety? I don't. And I know the conversation that's going to be had there. We had it last week. That's where he's going to be put. I don't love that situation for him, but it is what it is. Last year, the 3 on an island one, and I'm running through these a little bit faster because I've been going for 2.5 hours, and I do have to go out of here in a few minutes. But 3 on an island this year, I said Rodgers, grizzled vet, knows his way around life, I guess, and really I'm just in hopes that he brought some things to make the stay easier. Maybe he has some edibles, maybe he has some ayahuasca, maybe he has some things to make the time pass. So I want Rodgers for the substance abuse. Sauce because you need a guy to catch a rabbit, you need a guy to climb a tree to get some coconuts or whatever it may be. Sauce is the best athlete while also being a great dude. And then I had Quinnen Williams for the reason that Kyle Smith and I always talk about. If you needed somebody to fight like a bear, a brown bear stumbles upon you, you need him to scare him off while also being a great dude, funny, lighthearted. Quinnen Williams. So crash on an island. I want 3 guys on the plane to survive with me. It's Rodgers, it's Sauce, and it's Quinnen Williams. Go eat, Joe. You deserve it. Yeah, I just got to run through the rest of these. Final regular season prediction. I did 11-6. I am really leaning towards like 11-6, 12-5. I think the Jets will be 12-5 before they're 10-7. But I want to be relatively like cautious just because I'm a Jets fan. So 11-6 with 12-5 being more likely than 10-6 for their record. AFC East finish first. Playoff seed. I'm going to say, let's see who finishes better than them. Maybe the Chiefs. Chiefs, Ravens, tough division. Bengals, no. Bills, no. Second seed. Jets second seed, 11-6. Pro Bowl players on the team who will be Pro Bowlers in 2024. Quinn Williams, Sauce, Rodgers, Hall, Wilson, and Reddick. If I had to say Pro Bowl players, all pro players, Q and Sauce, playoff seed 3. Joe's been hitting the bench. Dana, I appreciate you noticing. I've been getting after it. I've been getting after it. Thanks, man. Facts, Bonesy Joe, let us know when you're back with us. I can never remember when you're on besides Friday before me. Yeah. I'll tell you guys in a second. I do a rotating schedule, right? Like I work 5-2, 5-3, so I never stay like Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I work 4 to 12, 4 p.m. to 12 at night, and my days move every single week. So my show cannot be consistent anymore, unfortunately. So it's going to be random. So I apologize for that reason, but it is what it is. I can't really fix it. All pro Q and Sauce, favorite offseason move. Last year I had Clark and he got injured before he even played a snap for the Jets, which is so disappointing. Favorite offseason move. I'm going to say the combo of Smith and Williams before the draft. I kind of talked about it before with Nania. We were all, and I'm not going to Jets X Factor, you're a fireman. I'm a police officer. But before the draft, like a lot of people, and again, I'm sorry for shortening this a little bit, before the draft, because I can get into this forever, we thought one big receiver, one big offensive lineman, and then the reverse of that in the draft. So if we landed Tyron Smith, we wanted Odunze at 10. If we landed, let's say, Calvin Ridley, we wanted Fashanu at 10. But the fact that they were able to both land a big-time receiver and a big-time offensive lineman and go into the draft. And not only Tyron Smith, you landed Morgan Moses too. Like they really were able to do a ton to the team that we didn't necessarily expect. So they crushed the offseason in terms of the guys they brought in. So I would say the pairing of Smith and Williams was like, holy shit, they got both like big fish. And then now we can go to the draft with true flexibility. So I can't really boil it down to one move. It was a combination of what they did on the offensive line and at receiver that really excited me. In free agency prior to the draft. And then the least favorite move of the offseason, Morgan Moses might be the most underrated move of all the offseason, which I agree with Rivka. I think in terms of underrated moves, like 5th round pick, 6th round pick for a guy who, in my opinion, is the top half of the league right tackle. Great point. And then the last one I have was the least favorite move of the offseason. Last year, I said no backup quarterback and tackle. And this year, I am saying their defensive tackle handling. Again, I am not saying that Kinlaw or Fotu cannot be better than what they had last year. What I'm telling you is that Al Woods' Seahawks film prior to coming to the Jets was better than Leaky Fotu's Cardinals film prior to coming to the Jets. What I can tell you is I like Quentin Jefferson's pre-Jets film a lot more than I like Kinlaw's pre-film. So I'm going to say defensive tackle is the move that I like the least. I appreciate you guys. I know there's a dead time in the offseason. We did a whole stat prediction, superlatives. Next week, I am building an all 22 versus Sabo. So we're both going to start a roster with Aaron Rodgers as a starting quarterback. And then from there, we draft the players. If he drafts Tyron Smith cannot be in my Jets all 20 or starting 22. And then we're going to draft a team versus each other. And then you guys are going to decide who has the better team, who would win more games. After that, we're going to do a top 25 with Nania. We're going to stack the AFC East and rank the position groups. We're going to do 53-man roster predictions. So we have more fun, like superlative based shows in the coming weeks. Next week, Sabo. Building that starting 22 will probably be on Wednesday in the afternoon, I would anticipate. So again, I'm sorry for the different times. Just keep the notifications on, keep checking. I appreciate you guys. You should flip for backup quarterbacks. I'm going to do that against the starting guys, but I appreciate you guys. I will see you next time.